Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video. Rickon. Ever since his arm had healed, Rickon seemed to wish it hadn't, since all he had been doing since was an incredible amount of drills and training in the yard. Archery wasn't a problem at all for him, but when his skill with a bow was finally noticed, he went from drilling to teaching with the Maester at Arms. He was often tasked with showing all the children between the ages of 10 and 15. Most of the older students doubted him right until they could see him plant an arrow in every bullseye of every target before they could get a single arrow into one target. The whole time Rickon carried the sword Jon gifted to him, and the whole time he still wasn't able to use it properly. It upset him greatly that Jon didn't give him a smaller sword he could use like he did Arya, but it didn't stop him from practicing with a wooden sword. Arya was always training with the big blonde lady knight and her squire, until they both left on request of Sansa to settle a problem at the Dreadfort regarding the wildlings. Since then, Rickon has been having brutal lessons from his sister, learning what she called water dancing. It made him feel ridiculous, but he witnessed her skill before and couldn't help but be envious of that kind of ability. Today, however, she was in the middle of her own business. Ever since Sansa had become queen in the north, Arya spent a great deal of time brooding in the crypts at their father and brother's tomb, but her skill in brooding was nowhere near Jon's. She seemed as if she was trying to cut herself off from everyone else. It was like she was trying to say that she didn't need anyone's company. Her reaction to Jon's true-born birth was rather odd. She had none. Or rather, she was surprised, but she never said anything. She just nodded to all of them and went about her business that day. Rickon decided to find some peace and quiet as well, and decided to do what his father did at times, and sat at the edge of the hot spring next to the weirwood tree. He wished he had his father's sword, Ice, to polish and clean. As far as he knew, it was reforged into the big blonde woman's sword, and one more, technically her sword, should have been returned to the Starks, but Sansa allowed the Lady Knight to keep it. Maybe when he learned where the other sword was, he would try to get it back. He was lying down in the snow, leaning his head up against Ghost's body. He had already practiced enough things for one day. Reading, writing, fighting, even manners of the court. He envied the younger sons of lords. They didn't have to do all this. Only the firstborn. He heard that Robb never lost a battle during the war. Despite his mistakes that led him to his demise, he was a brilliant commander. But Sansa specifically told Maester Aemon to educate him in the difference between a tactician and a strategist. Robb was the latter. Had he been the former, he would have seen the treacheries that came. His siblings were always too busy to spend quality time with him. Arya was in the crypts, Sansa was with Bran, and all the other children his age returned to Wintertown since their drills were done for the day. Ghost seemed to be his only company at all times, except he might as well not be there at all, since he was never playful like the other direwolves were. During his nap, Rickon was jostled by Ghost when all of a sudden the direwolf lifted his head up, his ears twitched, and his eyes darted around. He stood up on all fours, letting Rickon's head plop to the ground. Before Rickon could sit up straight, Ghost had already run out of the Godswood at full speed, leaving him alone. Was it something I said? His words directed to the emptiness around him. The only thing that kept him company now was the face of the weirwood. The face always looked sad because of the red sap that bled constantly down its cheeks like tears. He didn't have many memories of things before his father and sisters left Winterfell. Most of them were muddled, but he did remember that he never liked to play near the heart tree. The face always scared him. Old Nan used to say that sometimes the weirwoods would speak the whispers of those who have left this world. Did that mean that if he listened long enough, he might hear his father's voice? Maybe even Robb or Osha? He doubted that his mother's voice would be among them since she believed in the Seven. He walked up to the mouth of the heart tree and leaned in. He listened as carefully as he could, but the only whispers he heard were those of the wind. He shrugged as he leaned away. He felt a bit surprised that he didn't hear anything. Given that the heart tree could be used to see visions of the past, proved that there was magic, so it seemed possible that the whispers of the dead might be heard. I suppose only visions then. Bran was the one who actually took them to the only visions he was able to have, but maybe he could do it on his own. If he could, then he could look into the memories he had forgotten. He could see his father and mother again, and Robb and Shaggy. Rickon moved his hands to the pale wood and placed his palm next to the face. He instantly felt a great sensation flow through his arm into his body. He felt his mind and consciousness being pulled from one place to another. He was in a place unfamiliar to him. If he had to guess, he was somewhere in the north because of how much snow was around him and how much was falling. He was surrounded by barren hills and mountains and couldn't recognize the landscape. He looked all around, trying to find something that he might recognize. From over a hill behind him, Rickon could hear the sound of what he thought was thunder, but it couldn't be. Since when was there thunder during a snowstorm? It was coming from over a hill right behind him. He pulled the sides of his cloak over his body and trudged through the snow up the hill. When he reached the top, he was terrified at what he saw. Before him in a valley was an army of tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of soldiers marching. The size of the army stretched as far as he could see, like there was no end to them. One thing that he noticed was that every soldier had eyes of blue, and their bodies were frozen in a state of decay. They were all just walking corpses with tattered furs, rusted armor, and broken weapons. He saw animals with the same features amongst the men and froze when he witnessed dozens of giants in the middle of the army as well. This was it. The army of the dead. Jon was telling the truth after all. Not that Rickon doubted his brother, but actually seeing it was overwhelming. Sansa and the Lords of the North were all wrong. They won't have a single chance without Daenerys Targaryen's help, even with Ygritte and Lyaris. He felt the urge to run as far and fast as he could from all of this, but he was too afraid to do so. It only became worse when the entire army halted all at once. It became deathly silent, as they all just stood there as if waiting for something. From behind, Rickon felt the presence of someone approaching him. He turned around, and riding up to a small rocky ledge overlooking the valley were 8 men riding dead horses. They looked like old men, but their skin was like ice and their eyes bluer than the soldiers. One of them looked different than the rest. While the others had white hair and beards, this one had no hair and instead had spikes of ice protruding from his head, forming what could be called a crown. They all halted and gazed upon the army. Their expressions were unimpressed, like they were expecting it to be this massive. The one with the crown turned his gaze. Rickon, as if he could see him, his very gaze stole the last warmth of Rickon's body. Rickon started to slowly back away, too frightened to linger, but the crowned Iceman dismounted his horse and walked toward him. But this was just a vision. Rickon wasn't really there. He couldn't be seen, could he? Rickon tripped backwards into the snow and panicked. His hands kept getting caught on the inside of his cloak, preventing him from crawling backwards in the snow. He rolled himself over the top of the hill and went rolling down towards the army of the dead. When he reached the bottom, he stood up as fast as he could and drew his sword. He was blocked by the army, and the Iceman was still approaching him. "Rickon!" Arya's voice echoed all around him. "Rickon, wake up!" she called out. It was the first time he heard her with hints of fear in her voice. "Arya," Rickon called out. "Where are you?" The Iceman was nearly within arm's reach, and Rickon held up his sword at him. "Stay back!" The Iceman grabbed the blade with his bare, cold fingers, and a strange metallic noise rang. The blade suddenly shattered, and only the hilt remained. As Rickon dropped what remained of his sword into the snow, the Iceman stretched his arm out to him. Just before he touched Rickon, a hand appeared from behind him, followed by the arm it belonged to, and wrapped itself over Rickon's body and pulled him backwards into the snow. Rickon felt himself return to his body and suddenly fell down, shivering in the snow. He was so cold that he couldn't move willingly. He breathed heavy as if he had been holding his breath the entire time. He couldn't believe what he saw. Arya was kneeling down next to him, calling for help. Rickon kept taking deep breaths as she sat him up. Maester Aemon and several guards came rushing past the trees to their aid. As Rickon finally calmed down and got a hold of himself, he was helped to his feet by Maester Aemon and one of the guards. "Are you all right, my lord?" Aemon asked. "What happened?" Rickon didn't answer. He only stared into the distance, trying to forget what he saw. "What in 7 hells were you doing?" Arya asked, looking like she was about ready to kill him. "I saw them," Rickon breathed out. "I saw the army of the dead. I saw the White Walkers. I saw the Night King. He looked right at me. He tried to grab me. He shattered my sword. Rickon looked at the hilt of his sword resting in its scabbard. He wrapped his fingers around the wooden handle and pulled it out, only to have a small bit of the blade still attached to the hilt. Everyone's eyes widened and their mouths gaped as he tilted his scabbard over and poured out small bits of steel from the inside. Rickon let the hilt slip out of his hands and into the snow as he felt a great shiver run down his spine. Jon was right. He was always right. "How about we go inside, where it's warm?" Arya suggested. All Rickon could do was nod rapidly. She wrapped her arm around his and escorted him out of the Godswood while the soldiers and Maester Aemon collected the fragments of the sword. They went inside the castle to Bran's room, where he and Sansa were in the middle of talking. Arya knocked on the door and waited for Sansa to answer. The moment the door opened, Arya pushed through with Rickon and sat him down in a chair that was currently unoccupied. "What are you doing?" Sansa asked. "Something happened to Rickon in the Godswood." Arya told them. "You saw it," Bran said without waiting for an explanation. "You saw them." He didn't even need to say who. Rickon shivered next to the fire in the hearth and nodded. "I saw the Night King. He tried to grab me. He broke my sword," Rickon said, his voice heavy with fear. "I know," Bran told him. "If I didn't pull you back, he would have left his mark on you." "That was you?" Rickon looked up to his brother, immediately rushing at him with a large embrace. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go there. I just did." Rickon let go of his brother, grateful he saved him. "I'll teach you how to control it soon, but it's still too dangerous. While he still walks." Rickon nodded again and sat back down in his seat. The cold was starting to fade and was being replaced by the warmth of the castle. There was a sullen silence between all of them before Sansa decided to break it with an observation. "Where's Ghost? He's always with you." "I don't know. He left me in the Godswood before I had my vision." "He's gone to greet Jon," Bran said. "What?" Arya asked, surprised. "Jon's here?" "Almost. He's only a few miles away from here. He's with Theon Greyjoy and Daenerys Targaryen. What about her dragons?" "Wait for it," Bran told her. There was a brief silence again before the sound of screeching could be heard. Afterwards, sounds of commotion and light panics could be heard coming from outside. "They're here with Ygritte and Lyris." "Rickon," Arya said, "why don't we go outside to see? Maybe something to take your mind off of what you saw will help you calm down." "Aye, that sounds like a good idea," he told her. Arya offered her arm to him, but he shook his head as he stood up and walked out of the room with her, leaving Sansa with Bran. When they got outside, there was a crowd forming along the battlements of Winterfell, and they soon joined them. Out over the fields of snow were 3 extremely large dragons, and circling directly overhead were Ygritte and Lyris. "They're huge," Rickon exclaimed. He never imagined that dragons could ever get that big. Beyond the dragons on the horizon were many small moving specks along the road leading to Winterfell. "That must be Jon," Rickon stated. Arya grew a large smile as she looked out in the distance. The dragons screeched before all of them landed in the fields, far from where most of the soldiers were camping. By the time the 2 Starks had reached the gates, Sansa and Bran had come outside to greet the entourage with everyone else. Rickon stood next to Arya and watched as Jon rode through the gates. Next to him was who he assumed was the Dragon Queen. He felt himself a bit starstruck at her appearance. Even though she was the Mad King's daughter, she was certainly pretty beyond anyone Rickon had ever met. Behind them was Lord Reed, Lord Flint, a gruff-looking man he didn't know, and Theon Greyjoy. When Theon entered, he earned many hateful stares. Rickon watched as Jon dismounted his horse and walked over to Daenerys, offering his hand to her. She took hold of it, people murmuring as she did, and dismounted her horse carefully. She didn't let go of his hand, and Rickon noticed she had a small limp in her leg. Jon immediately approached them and was let go of by Daenerys. Arya darted forward and squeezed Jon with a hug as tight as she could, causing him to let out a groan. "Careful," he said, "I've got some really nasty burns." He returned the favor and squeezed her back, earning a laugh instead. "You've no idea how happy I am to see you," Jon told her. "I was going to say the same," Aera told him. Jon seemed to notice the pommel of her sword poking up against him. "You still have needle?" he asked, amazed. "Course I do. It's served me well ever since you gave it to me." Rickon overheard and felt terrible. She was able to keep her sword intact for years, and he got his destroyed only months after receiving it. Jon looked over to Bran as he released Arya and approached him. He knelt down and hugged his brother, technically his cousin now, and let out a great sigh of relief. You have no idea how glad I am to see you alive. Bran smiled at him. You fought well on Pike. You watched? Jon asked, as if he knew what Bran was. I saw you take a step closer to who you're going to be. You really are your father's son. Jon seemed happy at Bran as he gave him another hug. As Jon stood up, he looked over to Rickon and Sansa, trying to stay smiling. Where's Ghost? Rickon became confused. You didn't see him on the way here. Jon became confused. No, should I have? Bran said he left to greet you. I thought he was, Bran said. But now it seems he's still going south. I don't know why. He'll be back, Jon assured them. He took a few steps back and introduced his new companions. May I present Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen, the rightful heir to the Iron Throne. He seemed puzzled as if he just forgot something. I'm afraid I can't remember all of her titles, but there are many. Daenerys smiled at him before giving a curtsy to the Stark children. It is a great honor to meet all of you, she told them. Your brother often spoke highly of each of you. Rickon seemed the only one to show any form of courtesy by bowing his head. Bran remained silent while Arya just smiled at her. Sansa stepped forward to her and stood an entire head, taller than her. Yet it felt like they were eye to eye. I am Sansa of House Stark, Queen of the North. Welcome to Winterfell. It seems the knowledge of your rising was true then, Daenerys said, not breaking her regality. The other Lords of the North and I felt it was time for a change. Was Jon not good enough for them? Something like that. Everyone could feel the tension in the air as they faced off. But luckily, someone broke it before things got turned bad. Jon! A man shouted from the crowd. People moved aside as Samwell Tarly stepped forward, looking as happy as he could. Sam! Jon exclaimed as he rushed to his friend and carefully hugged him. What are you doing here? You could say that the Citadel is the worst place for people who actually want to learn something. So, I came here to help. Sam then leaned next to Jon's ear and whispered something to him. Jon simply nodded as the gruff man who came with them spoke up. Samwell Tarly, he said. It's good to see you again. Ser Jorah, Sam realized, you're looking better than you did at the Citadel. Do you know each other? Jon asked. We do, Jorah confirmed. He saved my life, cured me of grayscale. Tat earned some mutterings of praise for Sam among the people. Grayscale was supposed to be incurable. Pardon me, Daenerys intruded. You said your name was Samwell Tarly. She seemed to be very concerned. Yes, I'm the son Randyll Tarly, the Lord of Hornhill. Do you know him? She didn't answer at first. She only looked mortified. You don't know what happened to him? Is there something wrong? Sam asked. Excuse me, Arya intruded. But it's cold and I'm sure we all are feeling it. Can we take this inside? That sounds like a good idea, Jon told them. Yes, it is, Sansa said. In fact, why don't we all return inside? Sansa turned to a guard that accompanied her. Inform the other lords to gather in the Great Hall. Sansa, Jon said. We've only just arrived. This can't wait longer than it already has, she told him firmly. As Sansa started to walk away, Rickon walked up to Jon, feeling bad about what he was about to tell him about his sword. Jon, I'm sorry, but I did something that shattered the blade of my sword. Jon looked down at him, his eyes noticing the empty scabbard. What did you do? Jon asked, baffled at him. Rickon was going to tell him about what he just did, but realized there were many other things Jon would have to know before he told him. Now that I think about, it's better to tell you when we have more time together. I agree, Bran said. First we should go to the Great Hall and take care of business. Damn it, Bran, Arya shouted. Why the hell are you on Sansa's side? Bran just looked at her the same way he looked at everybody, but Rickon could sense something more behind his eyes. Have faith in her. She's our sister after all. Sir Davos. Of all the journeys Davos has been in, this one was the most awkward of them all. He had planned on it just being a quick in and out of King's Landing, but instead he was traveling with one of the men responsible for the death of his son. Then again, he was just as responsible for bringing Mathos into battle with him. Still, it didn't seem to stop the Imp from constantly pestering him about anything he could think of. When they began using the rowboat, Tyrion would be doing whatever he could to make conversation, and Davos did whatever he could to push it aside. As they rowed to the shores of a concealed beach just outside of the city, Tyrion couldn't seem to take things as they were much longer. I must admit, when I was captured by Ser Jorah and gagged, I had a much more pleasant time. He at least ignored me completely rather than partially. It's not that I'm trying to ignore ya, it's that I don't feel like talking. Davos replied as he continued to row. And what else am I supposed to do? I became Hand of the Queen because of usefulness with my words. It's the only thing I'm good at, aside from drinking and warring. We still have quite some ways to go and quite some time before we get to shore. Davos sighed, giving up. Your spy master knows everything about everyone, so you already know all there is about me. What's there to talk about? Tyrion shrugged. It is true that Varys makes it his business to everyone else's. But when we fled to Essos, we lost focus on Stannis after he fell. As far as I know, his hand was not there, but at Castle Black. The next thing I learned is that you are serving the former Lord Commander, not as a brother, but as an advisor. I'm a bit curious as to why you chose to follow Jon Snow. It's a long story. Tyrion looked over Davos' shoulder to the beach. It was still quite a ways away. Then how about we start at the death of the man you previously served? Davos remembered when Brienne of Tarth told him and Melisandre that she executed him after the attempted battle at Winterfell. I thought about going home after that. I wanted to. I would have. Had it not been for what? Setter Davos wasn't sure whether or not to say Jon didn't really want people to know he died. But if told them, they'd understand the lengths he goes to. Someone was betrayed and killed at Castle Black. I heard that Jon hung the first officers for treason, but I didn't know it was for murder. But that just raises more questions. For wasn't it the officers who mutinied against him? Oh wait, they all had a shared hate for the wildlings and the one who let them through the wall. It was the betrayal that made Jon decide to leave. His men lost faith in him completely. How can a man command those who don't believe in him? I've commanded men like that. All it took were some words of encouragement and fear. When Stannis' men made for the Mudgate, my forces were cheering for me. Jon chose action instead of words. But even still, it wasn't enough to overcome the pride and stubbornness of the first officers. I'm surprised they didn't kill Jon instead.
They did.
Tyrion looked like Davos just threw a rock at his head. I beg your pardon? Is that meant to be another figure of speech? They stabbed their Lord Commander in the night and left him to freeze in the snow. He couldn't take it anymore. He took a knife in the heart for his people. He died that night. I find that hard to believe, seeing as he's still alive. Tyrion seemed to be frustrated, as if Davos had told a bad joke. He was brought back to us by a red priestess of Usse. Davos tried to hold back his rage towards Melisandre. Despite all the murder she was responsible for, he couldn't deny that had she not brought Jon back then, everything would be far worse than how things were now. Her name wouldn't happen to be Melisandre, would it? Tyrion asked. This caught Davos off guard. You know her? She met with the queen and was the one who convinced her to meet with the king in the north. Though I must say, I like her more than the first priestess I met in Essos. She didn't come off as a very devout practitioner. She's made mistakes, some of them unforgivable. He didn't want to speak of the princess' murder. He still asked himself why, whenever he thought about her, Jon Snow banished her after the Battle of the Bastards. Yet she brought him back from the dead, as it seems. I feel like that would make up for some mistakes. Some, not all. Davos meant to what he asked of Jon before he banished her, and he meant to be the one to execute her if she ever returned to the north. So you follow Jon Snow because he died for what he believed in. I'm done following men for what they believe in. I follow Jon because he did the right thing and gave his life for it. He didn't care about the pride of the men around him. As a man of the Watch vowed to guard the realms of men, and at the time, there were men in the realms north of the wall. I don't even think his fat uncle would have even seen things that way. Jon spent time with the wildlings, got to see things from their point of view. You told everyone he also saw the dead when you introduced him. Do you believe him? With all the weird shit that's been going on in the world, I'm honestly not surprised at things like that anymore. Stannis sometimes spoke of them before we even reached the wall. He spoke of the great darkness that lies beyond. I figured he was just repeating what his priestess said, but then Jon Snow spoke of the same thing. And if someone brings a legion of wildlings for the first time ever, there better be a fucking good reason. We can agree on that. The boat had reached the sands finally, and the two men disembarked. Davos pulled the boat further up the shore and planted the sand spike deep into the sand. The last time I was here, I killed my father with a crossbow, Tyrion said as he looked up to the Tower of the Hand. Last time I was here, you killed my son with wildfire. Davos moved past him, gesturing Tyrion to follow. There's a path to the left that the guards hardly ever patrol. Too many steps. Are you sure about leaving the boat alone? What if someone sees it and takes it? Then we're fucked. We best hurry. We could have fit a third person in the boat instead of all that fermented crab. Regardless, Tyrion would be sure to save some, aside for when he got the chance to visit a brothel again. They could have watched over it until we returned. Yes, they could have, but then we'd have to fit 4 people. Davos hurried up some stone steps at the beach, leading to the city. As Tyrion followed behind him, hastily, they didn't have much time. If Tyrion wasn't back quick enough by the time he returned from the Streets of Steel, then he might have to leave him behind. Tyrion. The darkness of the cells beneath the Red Keep were terrifying enough without the skulls of dragons scattered about everywhere. He felt like one of them might open its mouth and devour. He used to come here often in his younger years. He would imagine the bones coming together into a great colossal-sized dragon, bigger than Balerion the Dread. When he came across Balerion's skull, he saw that there was a great spear lodged in between the eyes of the dragon. The spear must have been shot into the skull by the scorpion contraption that was used against Drogon at the Blackwater Rush. Before he could observe anymore, he heard the sound of familiar voices approaching. He stepped away from the skulls, and through the shadows, the torches around him couldn't light. He saw Bronn and Hime getting closer, but Hime hadn't noticed him yet. Today might be the day I kill you by accident. Bronn must have told him something clever. Or insulting. Knowing him, it was probably both. Oh, you won't be swinging it at me. Bronn's torch unveiled the darkness that covered Tyrion, revealing him to Jaime. The anger on his brother's face looked immense. I'll leave you to it, Bronn said as he left them to it. Jaime's gaze fell onto his brother, looking ready to kill him. I needed to see you, Tyrion said, and I knew you'd never agree to meet. Jaime just kept staring at him, looking all the more angry. Tyrion couldn't help but feel nervous. At this point, all he could do was small talk to try and warm up to him. It made me look like a complete fool. I thought I'd surprise you by hitting Casterly Rock, but you were 3 steps ahead of me, abandoning the family home, completely unsentimental. Father would have been proud. Don't talk about father, Jaime spat. Listen to me. I once told Bronn that if I ever saw you again, I'd cut you in half. Jaime sounded like he meant, it would take you a while with a sparring sword. Tyrion poked. Jaime just shook his head, denying any humor at all. He was going to execute me. He knew I was innocent. He didn't hate me because of anything I did. He hated me because of what I am. A little monster sent to punish him. Jaime appeared to have a small bit of understanding, but it still didn't excuse him for what he did. Do you think I wanted to be born this way? What do you want? Jaime exclaimed, getting to the point. Tyrion could see there would be no pleasantries between them, so he couldn't help but oblige. Daenerys will win this war. You're a military man. You must know that. She already has 2 armies and 3 dragons. If things in the north go as planned, the number will increase to 5 armies and 5 dragons. You expect a northerner to bend the knee to southern ruler? No, we expect him to sit beside her on the Iron Throne. Jaime only nodded as if saying, of course. Daenerys is not her father. She's even willing to suspend hostilities if Cersei agrees to certain terms. Tyrion never went over his plan with his queen, but time was growing short and he had to act fast. Jaime's brow arched, disbelieving what Tyrion said. You want Cersei to bend the knee? You can ask her yourself. No, I don't. Daenerys doesn't. Not right now anyway. She has a more important request. Jaime looked at him as if he was expecting it to be obvious. And that is? She would like to arrange a meeting to discuss an armistice while we deal with a far greater threat in the north. Jaime just scoffed at him. The wildlings were let through by Jon Snow. They're his problem. I'm not talking about the wildlings. I'm talking about an army of the dead. The dead? And I suppose you'll be fighting the White Walkers as well, Jaime said sarcastically. Yes, Tyrion was as serious as he could be. Jaime continued to frown at his brother. You expect me to believe that? You expect Cersei or anyone to believe that? No, there's nothing I could say that would prove it to you. But there is something I can show you. All I ask of you is to please trust me. He had yet to bring his idea to Daenerys. It was madness. But the only chance they would have, in order to convince Cersei, they were going to need proof. I did trust you. I trusted you when I let you out. If you're Cell and I learned not an hour later that you killed our father, whatever trust you thought I had after that is gone. You think I don't know that? Tyrion said, angry with his brother. You think I don't know how ridiculous this sounds right now? The only reason I am here is because I want us all to live through this. I want you to live through this. Jaime looked disgusted at him. I hate you, little brother. So if you don't leave now, I really will kill you, even if it has to be with a sparring sword. His grip on the hilt visibly tightened. Jaime, please. I'll talk to Cersei. Jaime interrupted, surprising Tyrion. But consider this the last thing I ever do for you now. Leave. Tyrion felt right in the middle of glad and sad. I'll send a raven when we're ready. Jaime just turned around and walked away from him. Before he disappeared, Bronn walked up to Tyrion and watched with him. Even I can tell he has no love for you anymore. Bronn told him. Hopefully, when he sees the bigger problem, he'll start to feel it again. Tyrion looked up to his friend, recognizing the same person he saw when he left. My offer still stands. Whatever they're paying you, I'll double. I'm promised a lordship, a castle, and a highborn beauty. I don't see how you can double that. Running 2 castles would be too much trouble, and 2 wives would be nice, but then they'd fight over who gets what when I'm old and dead. Ripping what house I make apart. True, you will be a lord, and you'll have to pledge your banners to a liege lord. Tyrion, let that sink in for a moment. Unless, of course, you were a liege lord. Bronn turned to look at him, laughing. You'd turned a sellsword into one of the most powerful men in all of Westeros. Tyrion arched his brow at him. After all we've been through together, you think I wouldn't? And I would be fair and give you a true beauty for a wife. Not a fair maiden like Lolly Stokeworth. Or is it Lolly's Bracken now? Bronn's eyes narrowed a bit as he looked out into the distance, thinking about the offer. Piss on liege's lords. Too much work. Give a castle that brings me more gold than a liege. And I have a beauty in mind, but I'll need help to get her. Who? Tyrion asked, curious as to what woman would Bronn need help with. He was quite adept at wooing women as he was robbing them. The most beautiful woman in the world, he replied. Sir Davos. The streets of Steel were loud with business. War was approaching King's Landing soon, and many were in need of armor and weapons. The constant clanging of hammers against anvils was like a choir, but very out of rhythm. Sir Davos found one forge in particular that caught his attention at last, with only one occupant polishing a fresh forged blade. Wasn't sure I'd find ya. The smith stopped his work and looked up at him. He cut hair shorter than last Davos saw him, and his face was even more filthy. Thought you might still be Rowan. Gendry simply chuckled at him. I looked in shops, taverns, brothels, even thought you'd go back to your teacher. Should have known to come straight to the Street of Steel. I did go back to Tobo's for a while, then I came here once he taught me everything he could. Heard he's dead now. Queen had him killed for something about a job in the north. That was curious. He didn't know if Jon sent a call of aid for smiths, maybe to help make the dragonglass weapons they needed. Just shows how much she loves her subjects. Aren't you worried about the gold cloaks? I haven't been here in years. Why should they recognize me? Sometimes I hardly do. Davos walked over to a rack of swords, inspecting the fine quality. They could easily pass as castle-forged steel. Maybe even better. Nothing fucks you harder than time. Davos turned back to Gendry, getting another look at him. He'd grown a little in height, but he had the makings of a man. Anybody give you any trouble? Well, here I am, arming Lannisters, and I never get a second look. But you were right. Safest place for me was right under the Queen's nose. Don't be so sure. Safety is never a permanent state of affairs. Bad things are coming. And you came to get me. You want me to come with you? Gendry sounded as if he was upset, like he didn't want to leave his forge. The thing you need to understand is... I'm ready, let's go. Gendry turned away from Davos and approached a table. You should know what you're heading into. The North was going to be attacked by dead men soon after all. Do you think I haven't been thinking about it every swing of my hammer? Do you know how happy I am? Making weapons for the family that killed my father? The family that tried to kill me? Gendry tossed his apron he was wearing onto the table and slipped a satchel over his shoulder. I've been getting ready. I never knew what for, but I always knew I'd know it when it comes. Davos could tell he was firm on leaving. You might want to bring one of those swords. He was going to need one. Gendry only smiled at him as he walked over to a wooden beam. I don't know much about swinging swords. He pulled out a massive warhammer that was hanging on the beam, but this I know. Gendry walked out of his forge, Davos following close behind him. I heard Tobo knew how to rework Valyrian steel. He teach you that as well? Davos asked. He told me how it's done. Couldn't really show me since he hardly ever got the chance. The only times he really did it were for chains of the Maesters at the Citadel. It's not that difficult as long as you have the patience and the skill. And do you... Gendry laughed again as the left Street of Steel. If I didn't, I wouldn't have left Tobo until I did. You say he got a request from the North? Any ideas as to why? To forge something, obviously. I joined him at a tavern every now and then, and when he got the message, he told me he was going to make history. Then the Gold Cloaks appeared and executed him for conspiring with the Queen's enemies. Well, if you know all he has to offer, it looks like you'll be the one to make history. Do you know why he would have gone north? Probably to help forge weapons out of a rock called dragon glass. Gendry almost laughed. Rock weapons? What kind of person would want those? I heard there's wildlings in the north, but would have thought they'd switch to steel. Like I said before, you might want to know what you're getting into. Tyrion. Things were going better than Tyrion had originally planned. All he had to do now was convince someone stupid enough to go north of the wall to bring back a dead soldier. As turned the corner and the beach came into sight, he stopped when he saw 2 gold cloaks, a short one, and a ginger walking away from Davos, the boat, and a young man. He continued walking, keep his face looking down, but also trying not to look suspicious. As he passed them, they seemed to notice his scar, but he kept on walking. "Oi, dwarf," the short one called. "Fuck," Tyrion grimaced as he tried to signal Davos for help. Davos darted from the side of the boat and approached the guards. "I really wouldn't try anymore until the first bite hit ya." His attempt to get them away failed as they seemed to ignore him. "That dwarf," the short one said. "Where'd you get that scar?" the ginger asked. Tyrion stopped and turned around to face them. "You caught me," he said. "I am Tyrion Lannister, the imp who poisoned the king and killed his own father." The gold cloaks looked at each other in surprise, and Davos looked like he couldn't breathe. Tyrion suddenly burst into laughter, causing the guards to confused. At least, that's what the cunts who found me passed out in a tavern thought when they kidnapped me and gave me this. He pointed to his scar and went from laughing to slightly angry. Probably would have worked as well, if not for one mistake. Care to take a guess? The guards looked at each other again, still confused. The scar they gave me is in the wrong direction. They kept their hands on their swords, still acting cautious. "If that's true," the ginger said, "then you won't mind going to the Red Keep, so the Queen can say so herself." "Actually," Davos interrupted, "we are on a bit of a tight schedule. Can we come to a better arrangement?" He shook his money bag at them, getting their attention. Next to the boat, Tyrion watched as the young man grabbed a massive warhammer hidden underneath a cloth in the boat as the gold cloaks turned to face Davos. "A better arrangement?" the short one asked. "You're gonna arrange to pay us more than Queen Cersei?" He was cut off by the young man swinging his hammer into his head. Tyrion flinched as more blood than he thought appeared as the short guard fell to the sand. Before the ginger could even draw his sword, the young man landed his hammer in the dead center of his face, crushing it. As the ginger fell to the sand, his face now covered in blood, the young man put his hammer back in the boat. It was a boring conversation anyway. Davos walked back to the boat, pointing at the young man. "This is Gendry." "He'll do," Tyrion said as they heaved the boat back into the water. Shot. The great hall began to fill up with lord ladies, maesters, and various lieutenants. Daenerys was offered a place to sit near the back of the room with her escort. Arya decided to sit with her instead of the head table with Rickon and Bran. Theon sat the furthest away from everyone as he could. Constant chatter was present while Jon stood in the dead center of the room. He didn't even have time to change out of his cloak or his armor. Even then, he would still keep Longclaw at his side. He couldn't help but feel that there would be a need for it. He felt disappointed that he couldn't keep his personal promise. His visit to the crypts would have to come afterwards. All the eyes in the room constantly glanced at him over and over. The gaze they had added a mental weight onto Jon, causing him to feel heavy. He still wished he wasn't alone in the middle of the room. If there was any time for Ghost to with him, it would be now. But like usual, he was the lone wolf among others. Sansa had finally entered the room, followed by Littlefinger, and all of the lords and ladies stood up, as was respect to their queen. Littlefinger walked off to the side of the high table while Sansa took to her seat. Once she had taken her seat, everyone else did the same, and silence was all that remained in the great hall. Jon's eyes, for an instant, looked over to where Littlefinger was, and in that moment, he could see him smirking. It was then that he decided no matter what the outcome of this trial would be, he would keep his promise to Littlefinger. Jon's hand slowly crept up Longclaw's scabbard and onto the ruby-eyed white wolf pommel. His hand tightened as he took another look at Littlefinger. The odd thing Jon noticed, though, was that everyone had a look of great irritation on their faces, but they weren't looking at him. The only one who looked sorrowful was Rickon. "Let's get this over with and be done with it," Sansa said. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Jon asked. "It's not what I want, it's what honor demands." "Honor?" Rickon intruded. "What in seven hells is honorable about this?" "Rickon, you don't understand," Sansa said. "No, I don't understand any of this. I don't understand any of you." Rickon seemed to gain the attention of everyone in the Great Hall as he stood up from his seat. "We all made Jon our king because he's the one to lead against the dead. I wasn't sure about it until I saw them in a vision. I saw the Night King. I saw his army." Jon wasn't sure what Rickon was talking about. How and when did he see the army of the dead and the White Walkers? The only visions he knew of were Melisandre's visions through flames. Maybe Rickon unintendedly had one of them. "I saw those eyes, those cold blue eyes looking right at me. The Night King shattered my sword even though I wasn't really there. I saw the army stretching out to the horizon and that made me realize the truth. We can't beat them. The North can't beat them. We are gonna fucking die if we fight them. Jon knew that already and went south to get help. And you're all refusing it because of what? There's no honor to any of this. It's all just your pride. You can't accept the truth that we can't do this alone. You know what I say to all of you? Fuck your pride." Even with Rickon's ranting, the lords and ladies remained silent. But a few of them had shameful looks. Jon was the one to raise the army to fight against the Boltons. Some of you here fought for him while the rest have cowered away in your castles. "Rickon!" Sansa shouted. He looked at her afraid. His words were harsh, but they were true. "You're absolutely right, which is why we are having this trial. But he's our brother." "I know, and I know Jon never to break a promise either. This trial is to make sure he keeps that promise." "Now sit down," Sansa asked, but it was almost an order. Rickon looked over to Jon, obviously worried. Jon just smiled at him and nodded. Rickon looked like he was on the verge of tears as he sat back down in his seat. Jon couldn't help but feel proud of Rickon. What he did was disrespectful, but he showed authority and integrity and faced everything head on. He would make a good lord someday. Sansa resumed the trial, determined that nothing would stop it. "You stand here accused of treason, conspiracy, and murder." "Murder? Who did I murder?" Jon became puzzled, wondering if this was some lie Sansa was told. No, that wasn't like her. Something else was going on. "How do I answer these charges?" Her gaze turned from Jon to someone else. "Lord Baelish." Jon couldn't hold back a smile that formed on his face as he looked at Sansa. He couldn't believe what she just did. Rickon looked absolutely surprised. Jon then looked over to Lord Baelish, who looked as if he was experiencing defeat for the first time. "The Queen asked you a question," Jon told him. Lord Baelish regained his posture, trying to act casual. "Your Grace, forgive me, but I'm a bit confused." Sansa didn't shift her mood at Littlefinger. "Which charges confuse you?" "Let's start with the simplest one. You murdered our Aunt Lysa Arryn. You pushed her through the moon door and watched her fall. Do you deny it?" Jon kept his hand around Longclaw's pommel as he walked from the center of the room up to the high table. "I did it to protect you," Lord Baelish stated. "You did it to take power in the Vale. Earlier you conspired to murder Jon Arryn. You gave Lysa tears of lice to poison him. Do you deny it?" Her tone was becoming more fierce with every word, almost like a wolf growling. Lord Baelish continued to act sly as he stepped forward to explain himself. "Whatever your aunt might have told you, she was a troubled woman. She imagined enemies everywhere. You had our Aunt Lysa send a letter to our mother telling her it was the Lannisters who murdered Jon Arryn when it was you. The conflict between the Starks and the Lannisters, it was you who started it. Do you deny it?" Sansa's tone grew more impatient, the more Littlefinger gave excuses rather than a straight answer. "I know of no such letter," he obviously lied. Many of the Northmen in the room were clearly becoming eager for a reason to draw swords at Littlefinger. "You attempted to conspire with Rebet Glover, Jon Royce, Clay Serwyn, Ned Umber, and Wyman Manderley to overthrow Jon Snow and banish him back to the wall. Do you deny it?" Lord Baelish looked around at the lords she named, looking betrayed. Lord Glover stood up, smirking at Littlefinger. "Did you honestly expect us to trust you? And yet you helped her usurp the throne of the North all the same." Lord Baelish looked like he had the upper hand. Jon decided to contribute a bit to this feud. She usurped nothing, he said to all of them. Littlefinger turned around, looking confused at Jon. I did leave her in charge after all. Of course, never meant that she would be queen. But it was a technicality was willing to look past. You conspired with Cersei Lannister and Joffrey Baratheon to betray our father Ned Stark. Sansa continued, thanks to your treachery, he was imprisoned and later executed on false charges of treason. Do you deny it? I deny it, Littlefinger exclaimed. He faced every lord as he desperately tried to justify himself. None of you were there to see what happened. None of you knows the truth. You held a knife to his throat, Bran spoke. Littlefinger turned his head to face him and was clearly shocked. You said, I did warn you not to trust me. Jon was very curious to know how his family came by this information. He didn't know much of what happened when the Stark household was betrayed and butchered in King's Landing, but neither should Bran. Arya stood up from her seat next to Daenerys and walked slowly up to Littlefinger. You told our mother that this knife belonged to Tyrion Lannister. She unsheathed a Valyrian steel dagger that Jon was now just noticing. He was surprised that she was able to get a hold of something like that. Arya held up the dagger as if inspecting it and showing it for all to see. But that was another one of your lies. It was yours. Littlefinger approached the table, heading directly for Sansa, but Jon immediately drew Longclaw and held it up to block his path. Littlefinger took a few steps back, holding his hand out in front of the sword. Your Grace, I've known you since you were a little girl. I've protected you. Protected me? Sansa questioned. By selling me to the Boltons? Littlefinger tried to ignore her counter. If we could only speak alone, I can explain everything. Sansa sat back in her chair, her tone calmer and composed. Sometimes when I'm trying to understand a person's motives, I play a little game. I assume the worst. Jon didn't know what she was talking about, but Littlefinger looked like he instantly regretted something. What's the worst reason you have for turning me against my family? That's what you do. That's what you've always done. Turn family against family. Turn sibling against sibling. That's what you did to our mother and Aunt Lysa, and that's what you tried to do with me and Jon. Sansa, please, he begged. I'm a slow learner. It's true, but I learn. Give me a chance to defend myself. I deserve that, he demanded. Sansa just ignored him, clearly tired of what he had to say. Littlefinger turned around and approached Lord Royce and the Knights of the Vale that accompanied him in the Great Hall. I am Lord Protector of the Vale, and I command you to escort me safely back to the Eyrie. I think not, Lord Royce sternly told him. There was the softest of laughter amongst the lords and ladies as Littlefinger turned back to the Stark children and fell on his knees. Sansa, I beg you. I've loved your mother since the time I was a boy, and yet you betrayed her, Sansa countered. I loved you more than anyone. His words sounded more desperate than sly. Jon's grip tightened around the handle of his sword. And yet you betrayed me. Sansa stood up, looking down on the feeble lord. When you brought me back to Winterfell, you told me there's no justice in the world, not unless we make it. Thank you for all your many lessons, Lord Baelish. I will never forget them, but it's time for Jon to keep his promise to you. Sansa turned her head to Jon and nodded, knowing exactly what she meant. Jon stepped forward to Littlefinger and adjusted his grip on Longclaw. Sansa. Longclaw's edge cut clean across his throat, blood pouring out of the cut like a fountain. Before any more vile things could come from his mouth, Jon looked at the part of the blade that made the cut and was amazed at the clean kill. He sheathed his sword as Littlefinger grabbed at his wound, still trying to talk his way out of things, but only able to gag. I need. Littlefinger gagged before he fell to the ground, motionless and dead. Jon let out a large exhale as he turned around to Sansa as she smiled at him. I thought you could use a welcome home gift, she said. Earning a laugh from Jon. I think everyone here considers it a gift. He told her as many of the lords banged on their tables, chuckling. It was a ploy? Rickon asked. He exhaled and nearly fell into his seat. I honestly thought you were turning into another him. Sansa stood up from her seat and moved aside from it. The seat is yours, your grace, she said, offering the chair of the high table to Jon. He looked at it for a moment before wearing an amused smile. Let's get the floor clean of the dead rat first. He turned to face all of the men and women present in the Great Hall. We'll reconvene in an hour. As the lords and ladies dispersed, Jon spotted Lyanna Mormont. Lady Mormont, he called out. She turned to look at him, curious. I'd like a moment with you and Ser Jorah outside, please. She looked over at her cousin who sat next to Daenerys. Her eyes had a deathly gaze to them. Ser Jorah excused himself from his queen and joined the two of them outside in the courtyard. There was snow falling lightly. The people were currently at a bit of a break in their work, given the tension that was present. Your Grace, Lady Mormont said, please excuse my blunt words, but why in any hell would you allow him back into the North? He's disgraced our family and brought shame upon the entire North. I don't find his role as guard to Daenerys Targaryen excuse enough. I did. Jorah confirmed. I've done many things I regret. I'd change them if I could, but all I can do now is try to be better than who I was. Is that supposed to even make me think of forgiving you? You might be my kin, but I'd have you suffer the same fate. I'd have Ramsay Bolton suffered if I had the chance. She looked up to Jon, but if the king trusts you, then I will tolerate you. Ser Jorah looked intimidated of the young girl before him. He looked over to Jon, amazed. You weren't lying. Jon chuckled at that. Thank you for your understanding, my lady. But now that I have both of you together, I thought it might be proper. He undid his belt that held his sword. Lord Commander Gior gave me this sword at Castle Black. He changed the pommel from a bear to a wolf, but it's still long claw. He wrapped the belt around the scabbard and held it out to Gior. The Bear Knight carefully took the sword in his hands and reminisced its feel. Even Lady Mormont looked stunned when she realized what the sword was. Lord Commander Mormont thought you'd never come back to Westeros, but you are back, and it's been in your family for centuries. It's not right for me to have it anymore. Jorah pulled the blade out of the scabbard and held it closely, gazing upon the pattern of rippled stars the Valyrian steel made. He gave it to you, he asked, as if Jon was giving up his inheritance. I'm not his son. Ser Jorah looked down to Lady Mormont, and this would probably be the only time she didn't look angry at him. He sighed as he sheathed the sword back into his scabbard and looked at the pommel before turning his head and looking behind Jon at something, and then back to him. When I was found selling slaves, I not only brought shame to my house, but I broke my father's heart. I forfeited the right to claim this sword. He looked down to Lady Mormont again, as if asking for her approval for something. She gestured her head at Jon. The tiniest of smiles could be seen in the corner of her lips. Jorah held the sword back to Jon. It's yours, he told him. May it serve you well, Jorah eyes to something behind Jon before he leaned in and whispered to him. And your children after you. Ser Jorah, Daenerys said as she walked up from behind Jon. I hope there's nothing wrong. Not at all, your grace, Jorah told her. Jon, if you're done, your sister Sansa said she would like a word with us. Jorah, Lady Mormont said, I'd like to know of what you've been doing ever since you ran away from your punishment. I dare not defy the lady of my house, he told her as they walked off. Jon accompanied Daenerys back inside, and they were heading for Sansa's Solar. As Jon finally strapped Longclaw back to his hip, Daenerys inquired about Rickon. I never thought a boy so young could face something like that. He's a Northman, or born tough. What was that? He said about seeing the Night King and his army? I don't know, he said he had a vision of it, but I'm still warming up to knowing my family after I haven't seen them in years. He took her hand and walked with her away from the courtyard, and inside the castle to meet with the other Starks. As they approached the doors to the room, Sansa had left it open for them to enter freely. When they walked inside, Jon and Daenerys were joined by Sansa, Bran, Arya, Rickon, and Sam. Your Grace, Sansa said, as she stood up from her chair and approached the Dragon Queen. I'd like to ask your forgiveness for my attitude towards you when you arrived. I was merely trying to keep appearances and couldn't allow Lord Baelish to suspect anything. I understand. I've had my share of keeping false appearances. Daenerys smiled at Sansa, and she smiled back, bowing her head. Bran's told me that you know Jon is Rhaegar and Lyanna's bastard, Sansa asked. I do, Daenerys confirmed. He's not, Arya told them. Sansa was the only Stark to look confused. You were there with us when Bran said it? I meant that he's not a bastard. She looked over to Sam and nodded at him. He carried a book at his side as he stepped forward to Jon. Jon, while I was at the Citadel, Gilly and I found something that changes everything. He opened the book and flipped through the pages until he reached a passage and showed it to him. This is the diary of High Septon Maynard. Before Robert's rebellion, he met with Rhaegar and annulled his marriage to Elia Martell before he wed him and Lyanna in a secret ceremony in Dorne. What? Jon asked, growing pale. You're not a bastard, you never were. You're the true heir to the Iron Throne. Sam said. Daenerys was just as shocked as Jon was. No one said anything, they just let the silence surrounding them. Jon turned around and walked out of the room without saying a word. Jon, Sam called out. Jon didn't listen to any of them, he just left them there. As Jon walked throughout Winterfell, he grew angry and irritated. Fucking hells, he kept thinking. He found his way into the Godswood where Ygritte and Lyaris were curled up together, resting. They looked up at him when they noticed him walking to the weirwood. Jon leaned up against the tree, cursing at anything he could. All his life, he was trying to figure out who he was and who he was going to be. But ever since he first left Winterfell, the answers kept changing over and over for him. Can't I just be a bastard? God! Jon turned his head and saw Daenerys on the ground, clutching at the wound in her leg. She must have walked all the way by herself. Jon rushed over to her and knelt down beside her. 7 hells. You can't walk by yourself yet. Why'd you leave? She asked, forgetting her pain and looking right at him. What was I supposed to say? Something at least. Like what? I'm the rightful king? I don't want a damn throne. Jon helped her up as she was ready to stand. I don't want any of this. The fighting, the thrones. I just want to live a good life without people telling me what I am. I want to be my own person. Jon felt exhausted and confused. Sometimes we can't do what we want. We have to do what is needed. You're saying that I'm needed to be on the throne instead of you. He shook his at her. I'm not taking the Iron Throne from you. Then don't take it from me, take it with me. Daenerys began to look worried and sad. You've never felt you belonged anywhere in your life. Neither have I until I met you. I knew my place was in Westeros, but as far as who would be with me, I never knew that. Not until I was shivering in your arms in damn South. Daenerys, why did you protect me from the wildfire? Because of honor? To save a life? Tell me why Jon couldn't seem to form any words. He couldn't bring himself to speak. He wanted to, but he couldn't. Daenerys began to show tears forming in her eyes as the silence dragged on. He couldn't bear to watch her be sad, so he tried to show her why instead. He cupped his hands on her cheeks, and the next thing he knew, his lips met with hers. Everything became warm in a sudden instant, and a great fire within him burst forth. Because I love you. He pulled away for just a moment to look at her eyes, as if to see if she heard what he was trying to say. But were so beautiful in the light of white snow, like pearlescent gems. She pulled him back to her, and they kissed again, like it was the air they needed to breathe. His hands went from her cheeks to her back as she ran her bare fingers through his hair. When they parted their lips, they touched their foreheads together, feeling the warmth they had to give to each other. Jon, Daenerys whispered, I want you beside me when we win the wars to come. Are you asking to marry me? He whispered back. She looked at him with a smile. I thought I'd leave that to you. Jon smiled back as he looked into her eyes again. Daenerys, will you be mine? Before she could answer, Lyaris screeched at them, drawing their attention to an audience of Starks and dragons. Arya was the only smirking at them, looking satisfied. Jon and Daenerys parted from each other, as they both were at a loss for words. Jon offered his arm to Daenerys to hold on to, and she gladly took it. As the two of them approached the others, Arya broke the silence. So what's your answer to him? You could hear us whispering from all the way over here, Jon asked. It's a skill I learned in Bravos. Who taught you that? No one, she said, still smirking. So what's your answer? Answer to what? Sansa asked, oblivious. Daenerys looked at Jon, who was wanting to know the answer himself, before looking back to Arya. My answer is yes.
Rick.
Too much had just happened in the last hour. First, a fake trial for Jon turned into a real execution for Lord Baelish. Then Jon's truth wasn't the whole truth. And now the Dragon Queen and he were in love and desiring to marry. One thing at a time, Rickon would tell himself. It was a great deal to take in. The floors of the Great Hall were finally clean of all the blood that leaked from Littlefinger's neck. His body was tossed into the mud outside of Winterfell and burned. All the lords and ladies of the north had gathered back in the Great Hall, muttering and whispering about what would happen next, with the undesired guests. For Jon's request, Rickon sat in the head seat of the high table, and Bran sat on his right. The next order of business was going to be in their hands since it concerned them. As the voices quieted down, Theon Greyjoy stood up from his seat and approached the center of the room. He had changed so much since Rickon saw him when he took Winterfell. He didn't even look like the Theon he knew before. He looked like parts of him were aging faster than they'd that of. like he was half an old man. Rickon stood up, as he was instructed beforehand by Jon and Sansa on how to address the room. The lords and ladies silenced as Rickon spoke. "My lords, we will now begin the trial of Theon Greyjoy." Theon's eyes were kept to the ground. He was clearly afraid to look at the ones he betrayed. All of those around him just looked at him like he was a pathetic creature, questioning why is he even still breathing. Theon Greyjoy, you stand accused of murder, treason, conspiracy, theft, desertion, oath-breaking, and rebellion. How do you face these charges? "Guilty on all accounts." The Theon muttered just loud enough for the words to be heard by all. The hate for him grew even greater than it already was. "You admit to your crimes. You have no defense as to why you committed them." "I do not. I am guilty of all that you said. There's nothing more to it than that." The person Rickon saw before him was not Theon Greyjoy. Theon Greyjoy always had the last laugh in any conversation. Theon Greyjoy was an arrogant boy who always pushed people's sanities to their limits with his rude behavior. The punishment for even just a few of the crimes I listed is death. And yet, I am curious as to one thing. Theon still didn't look up to them. He looked terrified. I'm curious to know, who are you? This finally got Theon to look up at them, and the people around to whisper to themselves. The man I see before me is not Theon Greyjoy. You're someone else completely. Tell us all what happened to Theon Greyjoy after the Boltons took Winterfell. I'm Theon Greyjoy. You look like him, but you don't act like him. I'll order you again. Tell us what happened to Theon Greyjoy. He hesitated at first, starting to shiver. Theon was flayed by the Boltons at the Dreadfort. They tried to break him, but then Ramsay set him free. Theon didn't know who Ramsay was when he did. When Theon tried to escape the north, Ramsay found him and lured him into a trap. He was flayed again and broken into 1,000 pieces. Theon died on a cross. He was tortured, cut, and finally castrated. This caused another murmur amongst the lords, some of them shocked. That was when Theon became who I am. He became Reek. It rhymes at freak. There was silence after that. The hate wasn't gone, but something resembling whatever the smallest amount of pity was lingered. Sansa told me about you when she returned to Winterfell. You told her the truth about me and Bran. You betrayed her when she asked you to help her. Theon slightly winced every time Rickon listed something else he'd done, and you saved her life from Ramsay by helping her escape from him. Rickon let Theon hear what he said before Lord Royce spoke forward. My lord, it is indeed true that Lady Sansa escaped because of him, but that cannot forgive him of the things he's done. It wasn't just her life he saved, Bran said. If he and his Ironborn never captured Winterfell and forced us to flee, the Boltons would have done to us what they did to him. We would have died as would many others have. You didn't mean to, but you kept us alive. My lords, Lord Royce protested, that still does not make up for what he's done, even after the suffering Ramsay put him through. It doesn't, Theon said. That's why I came back. To do anything that might be close to making things right. Not even this can do that. Lady Mormont told him. Many of the other lords and ladies nodded and agreed. I know. Whatever justice you see fit, I'll accept it. The Iron Fleet will not attack, and neither will Yara. My life is forfeit to you. Theon looked up to Rickon and Bran, shriveled and shaking. You'll give up your life that easily? Rickon asked. What about something to fight for? What about your son? Theon went from afraid to stunned. How do... Rickon stood up, looking at the man before him. Whoever Reek was, he's gone, but you're not the Theon I know. You're a different Theon. One feel in my heart I can trust. My lord, Lord Glover said, you can't just forgive him for his crimes against your family. I'm not forgiving him. Justice must deserved. But before I do, I have one more question for the accused. Why did you do it? Because I hated you, all of you Starks. Growing up here, I was treated better than Jon because I wasn't a bastard, but I was still a hostage. I didn't belong here with you. The more time I spent living here, the more I wanted to be a Stark more than a Greyjoy, because I wanted my father to be proud of me. But no matter what I did, Bill and Greyjoy never treated me like Ned Stark did. And I'll always regret my choice, and I'll never forget it. Rickon let the words sink in. He was still too young to understand most of the things about the world, but he knew enough for right now that you and Greyjoy, you are found guilty of all charges, but considering what's coming for all of us from the north, you will not die today. There was discontent amongst the lords, but Rickon wasn't finished. However, when the wars are won and peace is found, you will be forbidden to set foot in the north ever again unless by invitation of the king in the north. Jon seemed to be a bit disapproving of this, but this was Rickon's choice. The rest of your sentence is as follows. You will leave Winterfell tomorrow morning and return to the Iron Islands. After that, I suppose you'll follow whatever your queen wants of you. And after that, be better than who you were. Rickon sat down, ending the trial, then just kept staring at him, looking sad and overjoyed. He motioned his hand at Theon's seat, signaling him to sit down. Theon looked calm for a moment as he bowed his head and returned to his spot. Jon looked over to Rickon and nodded at him, smiling, as he stepped forward to address the lords. I know that many of you feel that true justice has been avoided, Jon said, but as far as I've seen, a lord has given justice without robbing mercy, and such a thing is a rare quality in lords, one I think we all should aspire to have. There were small cheers and bangings of fists on table all around him. Your Grace, Lord Glover said, do you really think we can trust the Ironborn after what they've done to the north? If I knew we couldn't, their fleet would be burned by now, and every tree in the Iron Islands would suffer the same fate so that no ship could ever be built again. Lord Glover looked unconvinced, but nodded all the same. My lords, my ladies, the time has come for a decision to be made. A decision of whether or not you would still call me your king and follow me. Your Grace, Lord Sherwin said, we already said that we never truly sided with Lord Baelish and his plan to usurp the throne from you. It was all just a farce. I'm not talking about that, Jon told them. He was tensing up a little. If you're asking us to bend the knee to the Targaryen queen, we still don't trust her, Lord Mazine said. Some of us had guessed that you could have their blood in you because of whoever your mother was, since you can control dragons, but it can't be that much, and you are a northerner. She is a foreigner. We have no intention of letting a Targaryen rule over us. Yet you already have when you declared me king in the north. Everyone except those who knew what he meant looked puzzled, talking to each other. Lord Reed, step forward, please. Mira's father stood up from the back row of lords on the left and walked to Jon. As almost all of us know, you were with Ned Stark when you joined him in Dorne to rescue Lyanna Stark, who everyone thought died of fever. I was, Your Grace, Holland told them. Would you please tell everyone what she really died of? There was a quick silence, as if those who heard the request had to realize what was coming. She died giving birth to you. The chatter amongst the lords was louder than normal. Shock wasn't the best word to describe it. Whatever was a bit more than disbelief. Jon made sure his voice boomed out to overpower the loudness of the chatter. It was believed that Prince Rhaegar Targaryen kidnapped and raped Lyanna Stark, however, thanks to Samwell Tarly of the Night's Watch and the abilities of Bran and Rickon, information about what actually happened has come to light. You mean to tell us that you're a Targaryen bastard? Lord Glover asked as Lord Reed sat back down. No, I mean to tell you I'm not a bastard at all. He nodded to Samwell, who walked forward with the journal he showed them all not half an hour ago. This is a transcribed copy of the High Septon Maynard's diary. In it contains the record of his dealings with the Crown Prince. Rhaegar annulled his marriage to Aelia Martell and wed my mother Lyanna in a secret ceremony. The name I was given at my birth was Aegon Targaryen. This didn't cause chatter, only silence that was broken by a young lady. You mean to say that you're the true heir to the Iron Throne and the Seven Kingdoms? Lady Mormont asked. By right, I am, but I've already talked with Queen Daenerys and told her I have no plan to take the throne from her. The silence continued, every moment of it stabbed at Jon. Instead, I have decided that I'll be taking it with her. You're gonna marry her and rule at her side? Lord Forrester asked. Daenerys decided to stand up and address the lords and ladies for the first time. I understand you won't follow a southern ruler, only a northern one. This decision was made by the both of us, and it's what we intend to do when the long night is over. Jon resumed his declaration. When I was part of the Night's Watch, I met with Mance Rayder after the battle at Castle Black to try and convince him to bend the knee to Stannis Baratheon. I asked him if his people's survival was more important than his pride when he refused. Later, on Dragonstone, when I told Queen Daenerys that you wouldn't accept a southern ruler, she asked me that exact same question. It was then that I understood the position Mance was in. He was made king beyond the wall because the free folk believed in him to save them. You made me the king in the north because you believe I can save you. But if I betray that belief, then what's there to be loyal to? I understand if any of you will still refuse to follow me. That's why I leave the decision of loyalty to you. As of now, I'm not the king in the north, unless you all wish it to remain so. Rickon was nervous. Jon knew he had his siblings' support and Lord Reed's, but that was about the extent of it. There was more chatter filling the room, and things weren't looking good for Jon. But hope seemed to appear as a young Lord Ember stood up and got everyone's attention. Lord Snow, when you thought you were the one on trial today, and Lord Rickon defended you, I realized he was right. We disguise pride as honor, and it ends up being the death of us. My father betrayed you, Lord Rickon, and even killed his direwolf. He fought against you and broke faith with House Stark. I never wished anything he did upon you, but I wasn't glad when he died. He was my father, after all. There were some lords and ladies who thought my house should be punished further for betraying you, but you didn't let them. You showed mercy to me and Lady Karstark for the sins of our fathers. If you can do that, then so can I to the daughter of the Mad King. The young lord drew his sword and knelt down against it. Lady Karstark stood up from her seat and did the same, following the example of Lord Umber. Lord Reed stepped forward again and did as they did. Lord Glover began to bang his table in a rhythm. His banging was joined by Lord Manderly and Lord Forrester. The banging grew harder and louder as more lords and ladies joined in the noise. Finally, Ned Umber stood up and raised his sword as high as he could. The king in the north. Everyone else stood up, drawing their swords like they did the first time Jon was crowned. The king in the north. The king in the north. The king in the north. Rickon, not having a sword anymore, could only raise his fist in the air, cheering for Jon as well. With Jon crowned, once again he took his seat at the head of the high table and allowed everything to calm down from the excitement before he motioned for Daenerys Targaryen to stand and present herself. A hushed silence fell upon everyone. I am Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen. I did not need to travel here to know that there is a great hatred against my family in the north and almost every other part of the country. My advisors argued that I should not have come, but I had faith in your king's word that the people of the north are the most honorable of all of Westeros. I do not speak with pretty words or flattery. I speak with truth. In light of what has happened, I do not stand before you to ask for allegiance, but forgiveness for the things my family has committed against those of you who suffered loss at the hands of my father. I have not come to conquer the north. I have come to help save it. There were a few stern looks and a half a dozen nods of rejoice that more aid was coming to help. Lord Manderly stood up. Your Grace, the North has suffered greatly throughout the years. Our strength has grown thin from the might it once was. If the rumors of your armies are true, then we'll damn well need them if we're to live through this. A bit more enthusiasm arose from the crowds as Lord Manderly sat down and Jon stood from his seat. Winterfell welcomes you and your armies. Your Grace, we will be honored to fight and die alongside you. The meeting ended and the day quickly turned into a fiercely cold night. Rickon was with Jon, Queen Daenerys, and Arya in the Great Hall eating their supper. Sansa had joined Theon in his old room to be alone for a little while, and Bran was doing what he normally did, watching everything. Rickon took a bite of his cooked venison, chewing it quickly before speaking to Jon. Are we supposed to call you Aegon now? Jon swallowed a gulp of ale before replying. No, I prefer to remain Jon. As do I, Arya agreed. I'm sorry, but you don't look at all like an Aegon. Not enough silver hair. Jon chuckled. Give it a decade, and it will start showing. What about your family name? Rickon asked. You always wanted to be a Stark, but actually you're a Targaryen. Jon didn't reply at first. He only half smiled at Rickon. I've talked about it with Daenerys, and we've decided I'll be Jon Targaryen. It has a nice ring to it, Rickon told him. When will you two be married? Within the fortnight, Daenerys said. Hopefully my hand will arrive before then with Lord Varys and Sir Davos, and the other Dothraki from Dragonstone. Maybe then we'll have some answers about what to expect from the Golden Company. Oh no! Rickon said, remembering something he was looking forward to. What is it? Rhea asked him. Your sigil, he said to Jon. I had Sansa stitch a sigil for your own house, but I guess you'll be wearing a red dragon from now on. You had a sigil made for me? Jon asked, amazed. Can I see it? I'd like to see it as well, Daenerys said. Rickon wiped his mouth and got up from the table, rushing down the hallways to his room. He returned shortly with a piece of cloth that had excellent needlework done in it. He placed it on the table for everyone to see, and they marveled at it. The sigil was a gray field under a black night sky, and a white direwolf with ruby eyes faced forwards, baring its teeth. On its left was a blue dragon head with one wing extended outwards behind it, and on the opposite side was a white dragon head mirroring her sister, extending its wing. Below the animal in the gray field, words stitched in white that read, "Through fire and ice." Rickon was happy when he saw Jon, amazed at what he saw. "Sansa made this? She stitched it," Rickon confirmed, "but I came up with the design." Jon ran his fingers over the cloth, feeling each thread. "It's too beautiful to go to waste. I'll find something for this, little brother." All eyes turned from the table as the footsteps of Samwell Tarly got closer to them. He looked rather glad this evening. "Your graces, might I join you?" Sam asked. "You don't need to ask," Jon told him as he offered a vacant seat for his friend. Sam cleared his throat as he sat down, gaining everyone's attention. "Now that I have the chance, I'd like to speak about something that might help us for the long night." He directed his words mostly to Jon and Daenerys. "Something else I discovered is the basic principles of how to forge Valyrian steel." "Sam," Jon said, "that's fantastic." "Yes, although there's something I'll need your help acquiring if we want to try it." "What's that?" Jon asked, eager to know. "Well, when forging the steel, it has to be down in a forge lit with dragonfire." "Easy enough. If that's all there is to it, then we should have every forge lit like that." "Actually, there's more to it than that. You see, the dragonfire contains magic, and when forging the steel in it, it becomes imbued with that magic. However, in order to contain the magic, the steel needs to be quenched and hardened in a substance that won't destroy it. The only thing that can is what I'm afraid about getting." "What is it?" Jon asked. Sam looked nervous to tell him, feeling he may be rejected. "Like the Targaryens say, with fire and blood, dragon's blood." "Dragon's blood?" Jon asked. "I never would have thought of that." "Neither would any smith," Sam told him. "Using blood to quench steel has been tried before, but it's not the best thing to use." Jon turned his gaze to a window, looking outside. "Then I guess the hard part of this will be getting the blood itself." They continued on for a while about the dragons. Arya nearly asked Queen Daenerys for a ride on one, but instead she was offered it first. Jon had a smirk on his face when it was brought up. He probably suggested it to his soon-to-be wight. Of course, Rickon was given the offer as well, but he decided to pass, given that he was afraid of falling. Perhaps later in life he would take up that offer. Before Rickon could prepare for bed, he was asked by Bran to meet him in the Godswood with Jon. The snow continued to fall as it had been the whole day, showing no sign of ending soon. Bran sat next to the weirwood tree and Jon next to him. The three Starks stood next to each other, Rickon and Jon wondering what Bran wanted. "Jon," Bran said, "you wanted to know how we've seen the Night King. It's hard to explain, but it's easier to show you." "Jon can do it too?" Rickon asked. "No, he does not possess the sight, but he is a warg like us." Bran held his hand out to both of them, waiting for them to grab hold of it. Rickon and Jon both placed their hands on Bran's, and Bran placed his other hand on the weirwood. The moment his hand made contact with the bark, they all felt themselves see through the eyes of many ravens that nestled in a tree outside of Winterfell. They all took flight, heading northeast. The sensation of warging felt incredible to Rickon. It was similar to the green sight, but different in so many ways. He felt as if he was the animal itself. Their thoughts collided and mixed. The intentions, the impulses, all of it. Not only could he feel the raven's presence, but he could also feel Jon and Bran's. The deeper in thought he became, the more he sank into a state of trance. Time seemed to become something he didn't recognize, and the flight of the ravens continued to fly throughout the north. After what felt like something of a time he couldn't tell, the wall came into view, and one of the castles. The flock flew over the torches and beyond the wall. Rickon began to notice the sun was starting to rise. "How long have we been flying?" They passed over a great forest and some mountains until finally they flew over a cliff and beheld the army of the dead. Rickon could feel the fear coming from Jon. The army was bigger than when he saw it. The ravens flew over. Must have been miles of dead soldiers. Then they saw a ridge with 8 horses, their riders overlooking the army. They got closer to them, the Night King looked right at them, and they instantly returned to themselves. Rickon and Jon fell backwards to the ground. Their bodies were covered in a light layer of snow, and morning was upon them. Rickon felt exhausted, and he finally noticed a group of spectators surrounded them all. Most of them were guards and some of the residents. Rickon sat himself up, breathing deeply and desiring rest. Bran was the only one who didn't look affected by what happened. It's bigger than it was at Hardhome, Jon said. Much bigger. He's almost ready, Bran said. No matter what we do, the wall will fall. Tyrion, despite the quality of the carriages and wheelhouses of the north, the ride to Winterfell was a very pleasant one. The roads were fair, and the snowfall was light. However, there were times during the nights that some of the Dothraki grew colder than everyone else since they've never seen snow before or felt its cold effects. However, this only prompted them to go on a hunt and catch better game for the fur. They even succeeded in killing a brown bear near the King's Road. Unfortunately, one of the Dothraki went missing and couldn't be found. During the search for him, some of the Dothraki searching thought they heard the sound of wolves howling far away from them. Gendry seemed to be the best of company since he tended to have more conversation than the others. Luckily, things got livelier when they regrouped with Varys and Missandei and their company at Castle Serwyn. The rest of the way was sufferable, yet rather dull. In his carriage, Tyrion rode with Varys and Missandei, while the others rode on horseback as they were getting closer to Winterfell. They were currently discussing the topic of Tyrion proposing an armistice when they didn't even have a plan to secure their proof for one. Even if you managed to even convince anyone to agree to this, Varys said, "How do you even plan on securing a dead soldier?" The convincing will be the easy part, given that we'll need the rest of the Dothraki and the Unsullied to stand even a chance. But if the other lords of Westeros realize what the true threat is, they might even give us their support as well, making the fight even easier for us. Not only that, but it will show true unity of the Seven Kingdoms, hopefully winning over some allies in the war against Cersei. Tyrion had to settle for northern ale rather than wine, but he seemed to enjoy it more. He took a long swig of it from his leather pouch, trying to get drunk to ease his mind of the problems he had to solve. Someone else is going to have to figure that out. The plan I have is fairly simple. Go north of the wall and capture one soldier. As for who will do it and how, I have no idea. Whoever it will be, Varys continued, they'll fare better with the help of the wildlings. Though the mutual trust between them might be hostile if it's someone with poor feelings toward them. Perhaps a ranger from the wall might be best. Whoever it is, we can discuss it with when we get to Winterfell. I'm sure the king will know of who trusts the wildlings and who the wildlings trust. The king? Missandei asked. Jon Snow was successful taking back the crown of the north. Varys grew a sly smirk and spoke before Tyrion could confirm what he read in the scroll from that morning. Oh, my dear lady, he's down far more than reclaim the north. As it stands, he's even won the heart of our queen and plans to take the Iron Throne with her after we're through in the north. He did? Tyrion asked, wide-eyed and delighted. Missandei looked down to her feet, attempting to hide her smile. He laughed as he took another drink from his pouch. As I've said countless times before, he's the greatest bastard of them all. It turns out he was never a bastard to begin with. Tyrion and Missandei both looked at Varys at the same time, confused. My birds have sung to me a very fascinating song about a prince who ran away with his true love, and I think you'll find it most amazing. Before he could convey his information, there was a knocking on the left side window of the carriage. Tyrion, being closest to it, undid the locking mechanism and opened it. The knocker was Gendry, and he looked very intrigued in the conversation. Can you talk louder? He asked. This is getting interesting and I can't hear very well, and neither can Davos. Davos was riding next to Gendry inside. That was the point, so they wouldn't know we were listening. It's quite all right, Varys told them. All of the lords of the north know, and already word is spreading fast of the truth.
What truth?
Davos asked. Varys told them everything he knew about Jon's revelation, and all that led up to it, and the demise of Pettier Baelish. It was quite the mouthful, yet the spider spoke it fluently and almost unfazed by any of it, though there was hintings of satisfaction when he went over Littlefinger's fate. I see, Tyrion said. Ned Stark had to so that the great King Robert wouldn't have another innocent babe killed. Though I must say, even if he did know but didn't care, my father wouldn't have let that slide. Well then it's a good thing he's dead, Gendry said. Forgive me, but what was your name again? Varys asked. Before Gendry could tell him, Davos answered instead. His name's Clovis. He's a smith who's going to work at the Winterfell forges. I thought you said his name was Gendry. Tyrion asked, suspicious. Gendry, Varys said, intrigued. You wouldn't happen to be a bastard, would you? Specifically, Robert Baratheon's Tyrion choked on his ale, spilling some of it down his cheeks. Gendry didn't say anything. He only nodded. Well now, that is remarkable. It seems bastards this day and age are reaching new heights. Fate and destiny are either playing a game of their own or just letting the pieces fall wherever they wish. If my memory serves me right, which it does, you were an apprentice to Tobo Mott. I was before the Queen had him executed, Gendry confirmed. Yes, for accepting a job in Winterfell. How'd you know all this? Gendry asked, fascinated. I make it my job to know as much as I can about everything and everyone. I know all about you and your journey with the Night's Watch and your capture. Although after that, you just went missing. But what amazes me most is the space you'll be filling for your master at Winterfell. The only thing he ever told me was that he would make history. Davos said it was something about making weapons from rocks called dragon's ass. Dragonglass. Tyrion corrected, chuckling. My boy, it is much more than that. Not too long ago, a man from the Citadel arrived at Winterfell with the evidence of Rhaegar and Lyanna's marriage, but it wasn't the only thing he brought. Supposedly, he also uncovered the secret to creating Valyrian steel. Is he a bastard as well? Tyrion asked. Not this time, but that doesn't seem to stop him from amazing me. He's a brother of the Night's Watch, and the stories about him are quite remarkable. He ranged north with Jorah Mormont, he let Brandon Stark through the wall, and he even cured our Ser Jorah of his grayscale when the Archmaester forbade it. Varys' moment of admiration was ended abruptly as his grimaced, the only thing that troubles me is his name. If he's not a bastard, I can't see why it would trouble you. He's actually the son of a certain lord our queen executed at the Blackwater Rush. His name is Samwell Tarly. Tyrion didn't say anything. He only felt distressed. Of all the people in the world, it had to have fucking Tarly. And he's at Winterfell right now with the queen. See for yourself, Gendry said from outside. The castle's just up ahead. Tyrion stuck his head out the window and looked outside. Winterfell was in the distance, and he could see not just the queen's dragons, but Jon's as well, flying in the skies above the castle. As the convoy entered through the gates, the carriage stopped finally, and Tyrion stood up, stretching before he put on his fur cloak. Well, we're about to take the next steps to our deaths, or to our victory. The door opened, and Tyrion stepped outside, followed by Missandei and then Varys. The cold instantly hit Tyrion's face as he set foot in the muddy snow. Outside of the carriage, there stood all of the Stark children, except for Bran, who sat in his chair, obviously. Next to them was Jon and Daenerys, both looking happy to see them. My queen, and soon to be my king. Tyrion curled his lips when Jon looked directly at him. I can't express the joy I have for you two. I'm glad I could get here before I could miss such a joyous union. Lord Tyrion, Jon stepped forward, offering his hand for a shake. It's good to see again. As Tyrion accepted his hand, his eyes fell on Sansa. My dear wife, he joked. I'm glad you made home away from my sister. Lord Tyrion, Sansa gave a curtsy and wore an amused smile. I'm glad your travels were safe. For me, yes. For one of the men, no. He turned his gaze to Daenerys. One of the Dothraki went missing during a hunt, and we couldn't find any trace of him. The snow covered his tracks. Did everyone else make it back from Dragonstone safely? Daenerys asked. We did, your grace, and I have news from King's Landing. I can explain further in our next war council. That won't be until later today, Jon informed. For now, let's get you unsettled and into your rooms. Arry, Gendry said from behind Tyrion. He walked past him straight towards Arya Stark. I can't believe you're still alive. The instant he got close to her, she gave him a tight hug, but sounded angry with him. You arse! I thought the Red Witch killed you. The only person Tyrion could think of that could fit the description of a Red Witch was Melisandre. Arse? That's not how a lady should talk. Gendry chuckled as she pushed him away from her. Ow, that was not very ladylike. She drew her small sword and poked the tip at Gendry's tunic. For the last time, I'm not a lady. Sorry, he told her, but anyone can point a sword at someone, even a lady. I wouldn't test her, Jon said to Gendry as he approached him. She's probably the second best fighter in this castle. The young Stark girl sheathed her sword, looking doubtful at Jon. Second best? Jon didn't say anything, he only smirked at her. He faced Gendry and offered his hand to him. I'm Jon Snow, and you are... Name's Gendry, milord. I'm Robert Baratheon's son, bastard son, that is. This caught the attention of everyone who heard it, but it was as if he was trying to make sure as many who could hear it heard it, since almost everyone around them did. You fucking idiot! Do you not know whose father yours killed? Tyrion thought as he tensed up. What? Arya asked. When did you learn this? When the Brotherhood sold me to the Red Woman. Jon looked more nervous than anyone else. I mean, no offense, but information like that isn't best to be paraded around. There's quite a lot of bad history with Robert Baratheon and the Targaryens. Tyrion noticed Jon trying to gesture to Daenerys. Surprisingly, she remained rather calm. I know that my father was friends with yours. Why can't we be friends? Your father killed mine in battle. Jon didn't sound angry or offended. In fact, it felt as if he was trying to keep the situation calm about this. But Eddard Stark was the one who raised you since you were born, wasn't he? If that's not a father, I don't know what is. I admit I never met mine or even seen him, but I don't have anyone to call that, so I'll take what I can get. Your Grace, Tyrion cut in, I do admit that this is rather unexpected and poorly timed. However, given that boy is the last surviving Baratheon in the world, I do believe that this presents the perfect opportunity to restart the relationships and the peace that once existed between the Baratheons and the Targaryens. The Lords of the North are giving you the chance to prove that you aren't your father. I see no reason to give the boy the same chance. Jon, Arya spoke. If you don't, I'll prove to everyone here and now who the real best fighter is. As humorous as it sounded, Tyrion knew the girl was being dead serious. You know him? Jon asked. We traveled together with the Night's Watch, leaving King's Landing. We were captured together by the Lannister men and taken to Harrenhal, and then we escaped together before getting captured by the Brotherhood without banners. They sold him to a Red Witch. Ser Davos was the one who freed me, Gendry told them. With nowhere else to go, I went back to King's Landing. I brought him here since we need all the help we can get. Ser Davos told them, and as an added bonus, he's learned the art of reworking Valyrian steel. A skill I hear that you're in need of. My lords, my ladies, Tyrion interrupted. As much as I'd like for this conversation to continue, may we do so indoors. I fear if I get any colder, I'll have to toss myself down the mouth of a dragon to warm up. With the awkward introductions out of the way, the meeting in the Great Hall with Tyrion, Jon, Daenerys, the Starks, Gendry at Arya's request, Ser Davos, Jorah, Varys, Missandei, and Brienne of Tarth, the high table was moved to the center of the Great Hall, and everyone took a seat around it. Tyrion told them all of his meeting with his brother and his plan to set up a meeting for an armistice with Cersei while they deal with the dead. It won't work, Sansa objected. Even if you could set up a meeting with Cersei, there's no way she wouldn't turn it into a trap. Which is why if something were to happen to us, then King's Landing would be sacked by over 100,000 soldiers, and she would be burned by the rage of the dragons. Tyrion had thought this out carefully on the ride to Winterfell, but he was drunk for most of it. We need to bring the rest of the Targaryen armies to the north, and what remains of the Dornish and Highgarden. But first we need a wight, Jon reminded. If we can get a hold of a soldier and present it to the rest of Westeros, they'll see the larger threat and hopefully put oaths aside for survival. Not only that, but seeing the dead man might scare the Golden Company out of the way, guaranteeing safe passage from the south. Now all that remains is who is going and where do they need to go. Daenerys said, if the Night King's army is amassing to its full strength, then we can't send someone right towards it. We won't need to, Mereen said. The bulk of the army is gathering near Hardhome, but small squads of wights are brought to it often. One can be intercepted. But where do we look? The lands beyond the wall are massive and cold. We can't have anyone out there for weeks on end to find a single group. The answer to that is at Eastwatch in the cold cells. The crippled boy just stared out into the distance as he usually did. To be honest, Tyrion felt like he was a talking statue. A wondrous thing, but unnerving. I'm not sure I understand, Tyrion told him, but I doubt anyone does when you tell them things of that nature. No offense. None taken. Now for the hard part, who wants to go hunt a blue-eyed corpse? There was a long, sullen silence after those cold words were asked. Everyone knew that no matter who went, someone was gonna die. With the Queen's permission, I'll go, Jorah said, breaking the tension. Daenerys wanted to object, but he wouldn't allow her. You asked me to find a cure so that I could serve you. Allow me to serve you. The free folk will help us, Jon informed. They know the North better than anyone else. They won't follow Ser Jorah, Davos stated. They won't have to. All heads turned to Jon, unbelieved that he was volunteering. You can't lead a raid beyond the wall, Davos countered. You're not in the Night's Watch anymore. You're the king in the North. I'm the only one here who's fought them. I'm the only one here who knows how they kill. There was a silence of doubt among everyone present. We all know this is going to be our only chance to seize an opportunity like this. If this does work and the realms truly band together to fight for an actual cause, then maybe this will not only unite us, but it will show them that the lands we call home aren't just something to fight and die for. They're something to live for. I would go with you, Gendry said, but if I can rediscover Valyrian steel, then I'll need all the time I can get. In that case, Arya said, we'll send someone who already has Valyrian steel. Her hand rested over the hilt of a familiar dagger. My lady, Brienne, objected. You are an amazing fighter, and no one will argue, but as your sworn shield, I cannot allow you to go north of the wall. They'll need fighters as much as hunters. Arya began to grow irritated. She obviously felt like everyone was treating her like a helpless girl. I must agree with Brienne on this, Jon said. I won't let you go north. I'll lock you in a cell if I have to. You honestly think a cell will stop me? No, I don't, but my asking might, because I don't think I could live watching you die and rise with cold blue eyes. There was another painful silence. Arya, if you were to become one of them, I don't think I could bring myself to put a blade in you, even if it's to set you free of whatever spell is cast. In that case, I'll go, Brienne said. She looked right at Arya. You still haven't reached further than a stalemate when we duel, and if me going keeps you safe from the north, then I'll go. Arya still looked upset, but nodded in agreement. Then it's settled, Tyrion declared. Ser Jorah Mormont, King Jon Snow, and Brienne of Tarth will bring back a dead man. I won't let you leave, Daenerys said to Jon, looking worried. Daenerys, Jon was cut off by the boldness of the queen. Not till we're married, and I know for sure that there's no way you'd allow yourself be killed. Her hand crept over his, and they shared a brief silence. 7 hells, Tyrion exclaimed. I completely forgot to ask, but when is that? 2 days from now, Daenerys informed. I think that's just enough time to prepare for the expedition. Are there any objections? No one seemed to be bothered, so everything was in order. Wonderful. Now then, let's plan a wedding. Jon. It was nearly time for the greatest moment of his life. Jon wrestled with the collar of the suit Sansa had made for him. He felt utterly ridiculous in it, but he did have to credit where it was due. The suit itself looked wonderful. Everything about it reflected something about him. The main color was black and covered in a feather-like pattern, representing his service in the Night's Watch. Over his left breast was a white, stark direwolf stitched in the tunic, and on his right was the Targaryen dragon. On each side of the neck of his collar were 2 dragons, one white and one blue. The last thing he needed to put on were his gloves and his cloak. Sam entered the room, eyeing at Jon's attire. You look fantastic, he commented. He only had a steward's uniform and Night's Watch cloak available. He had his hair combed back as well. It itches more than I thought it would, Jon admitted. It can't be that bad. You only have to wear it for tonight. It was easy for Sam to say. He wasn't wearing clothes that hugged him as tight as this. Actually, given that his size would make his clothes do that, then he probably did know. Thank the gods for that. Jon slipped on his gloves and tied his hair back in a knot. If this was how Southron people dressed on a regular basis, then how did they get around? The shirt forced him to stand as tall as he could and prevented any slouching. Are you nervous? Sam finally asked. No, I'm not nervous. I was nervous when I joined the Night's Watch. I was nervous when we fought at Castle Black. I was nervous when the dragons hatched. But this, I'm completely terrified. Love tends to do that to people from what I've noticed. You do love her, don't you? More than anything. Then what are you terrified about? Just take it one day at a time. Jon snickered at Sam's advice. Sam Waltarley, where would I have gotten in this world without you? Save the flattery for your intended. Jon could see Sam trying to hide something behind his mask of positivity. Sam, Jon said, dropping his optimistic tone. Daenerys told me yesterday she spoke with you. Sam dropped his smile, failing to keep it up. She did. Sam, I'm sorry for what happened to your father. I'm not mad at her, Sam stated, confusing Jon. My father was always an ass. threatening to leave me to die or go. The watch was the last real mercy he ever showed to me. I don't give a damn that he burned. It's my brother I'm mad at. Sam began to look distressed. Why did he have to share our father's pride? He still had his life in front of him, and he threw it all away. Jon wasn't expecting Sam's anger to be at the victims of the execution, but he understood how he felt. When he learned of Robb's decisions in the War of the Five Kings and how he broke his vows to the Freys, he couldn't help but call him a fool, then be the one to prove them wrong. Show them, wherever they're watching, that you're better than them. You're not the weak man your father threatened before. Sam's spirits were lifted, growing his smile back. Jon Snow, where would I have gotten in this world without you? They both chuckled together as Jon grabbed his cloak that bore the Stark sigil and put it around his shoulders. Even though he was going to take the name Targaryen, Daenerys said that she would be joining the family of Stark and wanted that to be recognized. It was time. Are you ready? Sam asked, eager to get to the Godswood. As I'll ever be. They both walked out of Jon's room together, and through the hallways of Winterfell. When they reached outside, they were greeted by a beautiful snowfall. Though the moon was covered and the clouds above were thick, the light of the lit torches was reflected off the snow, giving a warm feel to the surroundings. They passed many of the guards and residents, all of them reflecting joyful feelings as they approached the entrance to the Godswood. When they entered, they were greeted by every one of the northern lords and ladies, Daenerys' company, and even Tormund and a few free folk came down for the wedding. The trees surrounding them all gave a certain added grandeur. This wasn't a rich and fancy wedding with spectacles and entertainments. This was a moment of strength and absolute trust in the sight of gods and men. I thought you said northern weddings were fairly small gatherings, Sam stated. Usually they are, Jon told him as they walked through the Isle of Lanterns to the weirwood. Rickon stood in front of the tree as he would be the one to conduct the wedding since he is the rightful Lord of Winterfell. He looked more nervous than Jon felt. Bran was offered to perform the ceremony, but he refused, saying he had something he had to do. But for all Jon could see, Bran was sitting right next to the weirwood. Jon took his place on one side of the aisle as Sam left him and stood next to Tormund, who was off to the side along with Davos, Sansa, and Arya. They couldn't contain their joy and their smiles at him, though Sansa looked more proud of her needlework than she was of her brother. He looked at Rickon, who was still nervous, but he showed Jon what could pass as a smile in the middle of a stoic expression. Jon was starting to feel nervous again, but that ended when his eyes fell upon the most beautiful sight he'd ever seen. Daenerys. Her hands were shaking, not only from the cold, but from the fear. Missandei had just left, after helping her into her wedding dress. It was the warmest dress she'd ever worn, but it was also the most beautiful. Sindhu Stark worked wonders with a needle. The white was the same as the snow, and laced into the sleeves were many dragons that were dancing with each other. The cloak she wore was rather simple compared to the dress. It was a basic black with the Targaryen dragon. She sat down in a chair in her chambers, debating if this really was the best thing to do. She can't have children, yet she wanted to spend all of her life with Jon. As she kept on thinking, there was a knock on her door. She stood up, assuming a regal posture. "Who is it?" she asked. "It's me, your grace," Ser Jorah replied. "Come in." The door opened and Ser Jorah walked in, clad in northern clothes. His cloak had a bear pelt over resting on his shoulders, and on the straps was a pin resembling the Mormont bear sigil. "Your cousin allowed you to dress as a Mormont?" Daenerys asked, amazed. From what she'd seen of young Lyanna Mormont, the Lady of Bear Island was not to be trifled with, and she also had a temper towards Jorah. "Just for tonight, your grace. She said that tonight was for someone else, and I would be allowed to be what I once was." Such a permission was quite the honor. It is what Jorah wanted for so long, to return home as a proud Mormont. Daenerys smiled at him, happy to know that the fierce lady also knew compassion, but it faded rather quickly. "I'm not sure I can go through with this. Your grace, what is troubling you? If Jon and I do win the wars to come, and we do rule Westeros to the end of our days, what then? You know I can't have children. Am I to chain Jon to my curse as well? After we die, the Targaryens will truly be gone. May I speak freely, your grace?" "Of course. If I were you, I would say to hell with the future. Just keep your mind on tonight. Do something for yourself for once and enjoy every moment of what tonight has to offer. Because right now, it doesn't matter if you can't have children or if you're the last Targaryen. What matters is what you want. He offered his hand out to her. She was hesitant, but she grabbed hold of it and proceeded to wrap her arm around Jorah's. He smiled at her and began to lead her out of her room.
The entire walk to the Godswood was nerve-wracking. Daenerys did want this to happen, but how long would this joy was going to last was what couldn't escape her mind. But it all changed once she entered the Godswood and saw what was before here.
Lanterns had been lit and lined up, forming a path to the weirwood tree. Every lord and lady of the north she'd seen so far was there, watching her walk with Ser Jorah. Daenerys recalled Jon telling her that northern weddings were small gatherings, and this was not small. Her attention finally turned to Jon, standing next to his brother Rickon on his right at the weirwood. Behind him he could see his other brother, Bran, placing a hand on the tree and continuing to watch them. Missandei, Tyrion, and Varys. The worry that encased her shattered as Jorah stopped in front of the Lord of Winterfell. There was a second of silence before the ceremony began. "Who comes before the old gods this night?" Rickon said to all who could hear. Ser Jorah released Daenerys and stepped forward. Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen, the rightful queen of the Seven Kingdoms, comes here to be wed. A woman grown, true-born, and noble. She comes to beg the blessings of the gods, who comes to claim her. Jon stepped up to face Daenerys, his eyes never leaving her and entrancing to look at. You must look in his eyes always. Love comes in at the eyes. Jon Snow of House Stark and House Targaryen, the king in North and lord of the Dreadfort, who gives her. Ser Jorah of House Mormont, who is her queen's guard. The young Lord Rickon seemed to be calm finally as he continued. "Queen Daenerys, do you take this man?" And she was lost in the essence of Jon's eyes for what felt like an eternity. "I take this man." Jon and Daenerys took each other's hand, and they turned to the weirwood and knelt down before it. She was told that this is when a silent prayer would be given, but she was never a firm believer in any faith. Since Jon asked her, she would give a short one. "I just want us to be happy." When they rose up, Jon walked behind her and removed her Targaryen cloak and proceeded to remove his Stark cloak. He wrapped his around her, completing the ceremony and the union between them. She decided to listen to Jorah and think of what she wanted tonight. When he stood back in front of her, she couldn't help but lean up to kiss him right in front of everyone. This kiss wasn't like their first one. It was less desperate to continue, but more desirable. When they parted, they both smiled at each other and faced two onlookers. All that mattered to her at that moment was the one who stood next to her. May the old gods bring blessings to them until the end of all days. Rickon announced, and there was a light applause that did not disturb the sacred area of the Godswood. Jon leaned over to her and whispered in her ear, "There's something I want to show you before the feast." They waited for those that gathered to depart first before they left themselves. Instead of making to the castle, Jon led Dany down a flight of steps into a dark part below the grounds. This couldn't be the dungeon. Why on earth would he lead her there? The answer presented itself when they came to a long hallway lit with torchlight and candles. Aligned on both sides of the halls were dozens, maybe 100 tombs that continued on and on. In front of each tomb was the statue of a Stark. Daenerys could feel the eyes watching her, judging her for what her family had done to theirs. She had felt such eyes before in the Bay of Dragons. She strode forward through the weight she felt. Together they walked past many of the old kings of winter and past lords of Winterfell until they came upon two in particular. One was of a bearded man holding a large great sword of iron. The other statue was of a woman. In fact, it was the only woman who had a statue. And she stood with a hand gently out in front of her. "This is my mother, and that's my father," Jon told her. She'd already guessed, but hearing it gave her a bit of fear. She felt that she shouldn't be here. These people all suffered because of what her family did. Jon took notice of and held her close to him. "I want them to see you. I want them to see that you're not your father like everything else wants to think you are. You're a good woman, my wife, my love." Hearing those words made her smile as she looked at the stone eyes of her good sister. She didn't feel the shame as much now. Instead, she felt peace. She looked at the other side and noticed the tomb next to Lyanna Stark's was labeled Brandon. She walked over to his and saw that the one after was labeled Rickard. She looked at both of the men. They were murdered by her father, all because of a lie that was spread. "I'm sorry," she whispered before returning to Jon. "Thank you for bringing me here." "Jon," The Great Hall was bursting with noise. Northern music was playing and sounds of conversations and laughter filled the room. Delicious food was served and the company of friends made it taste all the better. Jon sat with Daenerys at the high table, feasting together with their family and enjoying every bit of the night. Something that amused Jon was when his gaze, constantly finding Tormund attempting to woo Brienne of Tarth, Tyrion was sitting with Missandei and Davos, either making wise remarks or telling jokes given how much they were laughing. Daenerys at one point inquired about Brienne's squire, who was surrounded by many young ladies, looking terrified but also eager. The hall quieted down as Gendry had entered the room. 2 men following him carrying objects, each covered with a cloth, and one of them was distinctly a box. The man who carried the box approached Tyrion and Davos, whispering something to them. They both stood up from their seats and followed the man to the foot of the high table next to Gendry. Up close, Jon noticed. All of the soot and ash Gendry was covered. He had been spending almost all of his time in the forge ever since Daenerys was able to get blood from Drogon. He had been set on making Valyrian steel. "My king, my queen," Gendry said, bowing his head. "After 2 days without sleep and many hours in the hottest forge I've ever been in, I'd like to show you the result of my work." Gendry nodded to one of the men who unveiled his object, revealing it to be Rickon's sword. "As to your request," he said to Jon, "I used the steel of the shattered blade as my material. And I've got to say, I've never made anything like it." Jon stood up, looking to Rickon, who was wide-eyed. The Valyrian sword of House Stark, Ice, was reforged into 2 swords by Tywin Lannister. "I think it's time for a new sword to take its place." Jon nodded to Rickon, who got up from his seat as quickly as he could. The man who carried the sword held the hilt towards Rickon. He wrapped his fingers around the handle and freed the sword from its scabbard. The metal sang as the blade was revealed. The fuller contained the same rippled stars as Longclaw, but the sword itself was a slightly darker tint. "A new sword deserves a new name," Jon declared. "So what will the Lord of Winterfell call his blade?" Rickon kept ogling the sword. He was finally able to hold it with one arm and swing it easily. He looked at Jon, smiling. "Snow, ice can be melted, but nothing can stop the snows of winter from coming." Jon liked it. It was simple like ice, but had a certain tenacity to the name. Everyone raised their glasses up, cheering for the name. "Snow." Rickon took the scabbard and sheathed the sword, taking it with him as he sat back down at the table. Gendry stepped down from the foot of the high table, and Tyrion and Davos took his place. "Your Majesties," Davos said, "if you wouldn't mind," he gestured for Jon and Daenerys to join him and Tyrion in front of the table. They complied and stood up, Jon escorting Daenerys with him. Tyrion and Davos let them take their places where they stood as they faced everyone in the Great Hall. The other man who came with Gendry unveiled his box, revealing it to be a simple chest. Davos and Tyrion stood in front of it as it was opened, obstructing Jon and Daenerys' view of its contents. They heard the box close as the 2 advisors turned around, each of them holding a crown. The crown in Tyrion's hands was made of silver. It had a simple shape to it, but it was beautiful nonetheless. It had 5 rubies planted in the metal, and the one in the center was the largest. It was polished smooth, and behind it, the Targaryen dragon could be seen. Tyrion stepped forward to Daenerys, smiling at her, and she stooped down to him. He held the crown above her head and spoke his words in a strong, proud voice. "I proclaim Daenerys of House Targaryen, first of her name, Queen of the Andals and the First Men, protector of the 7 kingdoms." Tyrion placed the crown upon her head, and she rose back up, majestic and proud. Tyrion stepped back as Davos stepped forward to Jon. The crown, he had caught Jon off guard. He expected it to be themed after Targaryen or Stark. Instead, the crown was made of steel, and in the center of it was the sigil Rickon and Sansa made for him. He couldn't help but smirk when he saw it. The crown was raised above his head, and Davos spoke to all. "I proclaim Jon of House Targaryen, first of his name, King of the Andals, and the First Men, protector of the 7 kingdoms." Davos placed the crown on Jon's heading. looking proud at him the whole time. He stepped back and let the lords of the north behold their king and queen. Long may they reign. Long may they reign. Everyone repeated, raising their glasses up high. Jon took Daenerys' hand, and they raised them in the air, accepting their victory. As the feast continued on, Jon remained at the high table, but Daenerys mingled with everyone. Tormund took notice to this and approached his friend. "You look bored for a man who just got married and made a king." "I have a lot on my mind," Jon told him. "And your woman isn't." "For fuck's sake, Jon, you Southerners really are dull." He turned his gaze to Daenerys and then back to Jon. "If you don't go down to her now, I might just steal her from you." Jon wasn't sure if he was joking or not, but regardless, he got up from his seat and walked into the mass of people. "Remember, Crow?" Tormund called out, slick as a baby seal. Jon looked back at Tormund, embarrassed. He turned his gaze back to Daenerys, flustered at the memory of Tormund humping at a bag and making sounds like a dog. He stood behind his wife and placed his hand on her shoulder, gaining her attention. Without even having to say anything, she stood up and leaned next to his head. "Let's retire for the night," she whispered. Daenerys took Jon's hand, and they both made their way to the exit of the Great Hall, hoping to avoid being noticed. It proved to be futile as Arya called out to them. "Your Graces, where are you two off to at this hour?" Jon had never heard her talk the way she was. He glanced over to her and saw she had a large mug rather than a cup. "Have you been drinking?" Jon asked. Arya laughed before he put the rim of her mug to her lips and began to gulp down its contents. She didn't stop until the whole thing was gone. When the mug emptied, she slammed it on the table and looked right at him. Not very much. It gained some laughter from nearby onlookers and from Jon as well. "Daenerys and I are retiring for the night. Have fun, you two." She refilled her mug to the brim and joined a wilding drinking. It was at that moment that Jon vowed to never let Arya get drunk ever again. They finally escaped the Great Hall and made their way to Jon's chambers. When they opened the door, they were both surprised at the view. The hearth was lit and a larger bed replaced Jon's previous one. "When did—" Jon couldn't finish his sentence as he took in the sight. On his table were neatly made garments for Daenerys, and a pitcher of arbor gold. On a separate, smaller table were 2 black silk pillows, meant for the crowns, when they weren't worn. This had to have been Sansa's doing. "It's wonderful," Daenerys said as she removed her crown and placed it on one of the pillows. Jon did the same and found Daenerys gazing into the fires of the hearth, the light of the fire dance in the silver of her hair. "I wish you wouldn't leave. I don't want to wait for you to come back." Before Jon could say anything to counter her, she placed her index finger on his lips. "But until then, you're all mine and no one else's." She removed her finger and undid her cloak, letting it fall to the floor. "As my queen commands." Jon grabbed hold of her waist and pulled her to his body, trapping her with a kiss. Daenerys' hands grabbed the ends of Jon's tunic and began to pull it off of his chest, while he began to work at the laces of her dress. "We should probably get to the bed." "Yes, we should." Daenerys began to guide them to the bed, and she pushed Jon onto it, falling on top of him. Jon just stared at her for a moment, admiring everything about her. He was hers, and she was his. He pulled her into another kiss right before he finished his fight with the laces. "Like baby seals," Jon mentally reminded himself. "Daenerys." The light of morning blinded Daenerys for a moment as her eyes focused as she began to wake up. Damn, she thought. It had been far too long since she had someone to love like this. The heat of the furs covering her was nothing compared to the heat of who lay next to her. Her arm was across Jon's chest, and his was around her. She could feel the scars of the knives, still not able to fully believe what happened to him. She traced her finger along the cuts, not sure what to expect from the feel. "Morning," he said. His voice was especially gruff in the mornings, sounding thicker with his northern accent. "Did you sleep well?" "Considering how long we were at it, I hardly slept at all," she jested. Her mood died down when she remembered that a night like that wouldn't happen for a long time after today. "When do you leave?" "As soon as everyone's ready." Jon told her. Daenerys turned her head and gazed at him. "Jon, please don't go." "I have to Daenerys." "No, you don't. You're just trying to be a hero. Heroes do stupid things and always get closed to death. It's like you're all trying to compare sizes." Jon chuckled as he sat up. "Care to name a few of these heroes?" Daenerys was hesitant, realizing the corner she just backed herself into. My first husband, Drogo, a lover I had in Mereen, named Dario, even Jorah, and now you all seem to try and outdo each other on who can do the stupidest, bravest thing.
That's funny, Jon told her. From the sounds of it, all the men you just were men who fell in love with you. From what I've learned, love makes you do stupid things.
Daenerys playfully slapped Jon on his chest. If you know it's stupid, then why are you doing it? Jon gave a long sigh before answering, because it's the only thing I can think of that will work. I can't explain why, but I just know that if I don't do this, another piece of me will disappear. It's like I have some burden on my shoulders, and this is the only way to free me of the weight. I'm not willing to command others to do what I can. It all sounded ridiculous, but Daenerys has only ever dealt with problems diplomatically. Whenever she had an idea like one of Jon's, Tyrion would somehow talk her out of it. But this time, Tyrion was the one who talked Jon into it. Damn you, Jon. If everyone returns and you don't, I'll burn down the entire wall until you do. I'll make sure that doesn't happen then. They were both awake and dressed within the hour. Daenerys didn't prepare fully as she usually would. Instead, she wore a simple braid and let the rest of her hair fall loose. She stood on the battlements of Winterfell as Jon and his party of Jorah, Brienne, Tormund, and Sar Davos rode out of Winterfell. As they continued on, Jon stopped and looked out to Daenerys. He waved his hand at her, smiling. She waved back to him and watched him ride with the others. She didn't stop watching him until they all disappeared from sight. She was joined by Samwell Tarly. Don't worry, he'll be back, he assured her. Jon always comes back. He'd better. Arya. After finally recovering, after a 3-day-long headache, Arya was up and about and staying away from alcohol as much as she could. She had been upset at herself for missing Jon's departure. And since Brienne left with him, she was stuck being trained with Podrick, though with his skill, it was more like was training him. He was better than most, but not enough to last long against her. She grew tired of everyone still treating her like a lady. But luckily for her, the Lannister took notice and would invite her to the council meetings whenever they were held. Today, however, she didn't even need the invitation since Podrick was nowhere to be found. She heard whispers about him possessing a magic appendage and that some women wooed him to Winter Town. In the Great Hall, Arya joined Sansa and Rickon with Tyrion, Varys, Lord Royce, and Lord Reed. Queen Daenerys had been keeping to herself with her translator, Missandei, ever since Jon had left. After many arguments between Lord Royce and Tyrion for the past few days, the strategies for the war with the White Walkers could finally continue. They all stood around a table in the center of the room, with a map of Westeros spread out and many tokens representing the many forces of the realms were laid out in various regions. Arya stood at the southern side of the map, while everyone else took to the west and east side. As it stands, Lord Royce said, there is just over 4,000 men stationed at the wall. The majority of them are stationed at East Watch by the Sea and the Torches. Combined with the Knights of the Vale, the Wildlings, and the Northerners, our numbers are just over 50,000. That's about 30,000 short of half of the Night King's army, Rickon informed. But the Queen's armies are going to fight with us. Sansa shook her head, doubting their chances. We can't put our faith in the Dothraki and Unsullied armies alone. We need the guarantee of more men who can get here now. Sansa's gaze fell to the Riverlands. Didn't our Uncle Edmure take control of the Twins? He did, my lady, Varys informed. With all of the Freys dead, their soldiers were in disarray, and without hope of survival unless they submitted to the other lords of the Riverlands. However, even with the Riverlands under control, your uncle has refused to meet with us, and has declared neutrality in the conflict with Cersei. That cunt, Arya spat. He's always been an idiot when it comes to war. During her travels, she learned how his desire for glory cost Robb the Mountain and an advance in the war. My lady, he does not do this by his free will. Varys folded his arms into his robes. There are 6,000 of the Lannister forces assisting the Riverlands in rebuilding the destruction of their realm. However, my little birds have sung songs to me about your uncle's wife being held captive and their son being one order away from an opened throat. How many men do the Riverlands have to offer? Arya asked to Lord Royce. If they can all be rallied, then 10,000, maybe more. And if the threat against our cousin and aunt was gone, would Edmure be able to give us his support? Lord Royce cleared his throat as if trying to keep an open mind. Possibly. if you could somehow prevent open conflict between the Lannisters and the Riverlands, that would be no problem for Arya, Lord Varys, she asked. Do little birds know who the Lannister men answer to in the Riverlands? They follow the orders of a commander named Comran Lefford, nephew to Lord Leo Lefford. He's the one who holds the dagger to your cousin's throat, waiting to cut it. Perfect. Arya said, content with the information. My lady, I must warn you, though. If the commander should be killed, his troops are ordered to sack the Riverlands and put as many as they can to the sword. Don't worry, no one will kill Commander Lefford. Arya contained a smirk she was tempted to wear, but it would have disappeared anyway because of the objections. You're not going to the Riverlands, Sansa ordered. Your place is here until the wars are over. Arya looked at Sansa, trying to remain calm. My place is where I choose it to be, and I choose to be in the Riverlands to help our family. Forgive me, my lady, Lord Royce interjected, but you must understand our doubt. How on earth do you expect to go to the Riverlands and secure your uncle's loyalty without risking the lives of his wife and son? Nobody will know I was even there to begin with, just like nobody knows who killed the Freys. There was a satisfying silence for a moment, before Varys broke it. I heard rumors of a girl who wore the face of Lord Walder the night the Freys were wiped out. When they were done choking on wine and their own blood, Walder's new wife found herself next to this girl. All eyes fell on Arya, and she liked it. The poor Lord of the Twins died days earlier. His throat was cut after eating a pie made from his sons. Arya looked back at Sansa again. I'm going back to the Riverlands, and I'm helping our family. Arya's words were absolute, and Sansa knew that there were no objections that could stop her. My lady, Lord Reed said, I can gather some of the Crandigan men to assist you in your task. I won't need help, not in the Riverlands anyway. My lady, Lord Reed inquired, looking confused with everyone else. Atreya walked over to the Stormlands. What's the situation in the Stormlands? With the Baratheons dead, I imagine things are hectic. When Stannis Baratheon died, Varys said, the lords of the Stormlands became into disarray with their liege lord gone. Most of their army was spent in the War of the Five Kings. And what have they done to choose new leadership? Even though it's been nearly 2 years, the Stormlords still haven't chosen a reigning house to govern over them. Some are claiming rule by right of Baratheon blood, but it is far too thin to have any weight. Then it's a good thing we have their rightful lord with us, said Tyrion. Arya tensed a little when she realized who she wanted to curse at these lords for creating another piece for their game. But for now, she would have patience and listen. My lord, Lord Royce said, you cannot expect the boy to become a lord. He knows nothing about being one, and he is only a smith. Indeed, he is, Tyrion agreed. But he is also the last living child of Robert Baratheon and the last potential heir to Storm's End and the Stormlands. We are in a state of peril and need all the help we can get. We shouldn't let things such as birth and status get in the way of achieving such. But he is practically a commoner, Lord Reed agreed. Many would seize an opportunity to manipulate him than to teach him how to rule. I know, which is why he'll be taught by someone who he trusts. Who? Rickon asked. Ser Davos Seaworth, Tyrion said. He was the hand to Stannis Baratheon for more than just his wit and smuggling, and when Gendry was to be sacrificed, he freed him instead. Stannis trusted him enough to come with him to the north. I don't think Gendry'll have doubts if he is mentored by him. You speak as if Ser Davos has already agreed to do it, Lord Royce reminded. He will, he has to, if we are to gain more allies. And when he does, we may even win the war against Cersei without having to spill blood. Tyrion gestured to the map of Westeros. Every one of the kingdoms except the Crownlands and the Westerlands will have declared against Cersei. Even with the Golden Company, she'll have absolutely no chance. If she doesn't answer to our warnings, we can cut off every available resource to her and let the people of King's Landing revolt against her. She'll have no choice but to surrender. Yes, this could work, Lord Royce said as he studied the map. So it's decided then, Tyrion declared. Lady Arya Stark will ride south to the Riverlands to deal with the problems there. And when she's done, what will you do when you're done? Tyrion didn't look confused, only perplexed that he didn't get all of the facts before he spoke. I'll send a raven before my uncle sends one, Arya told them. Hopefully Jon and the others will be back by then. When that happens, send an envoy of men with Gendry and Ser Davos. We'll head for the Stormlands afterwards. Excellent, Tyrion said. Now there's only one thing that remains. What's that? Sansa asked. Convincing Gendry to become a lord. Unfortunately, the people he trusts most are not, at least all except for one. He looked over to Arya, as did everyone else. Arya shook her head at them. No, if you want him to enter the game of politics and thrones, then do it yourself. He trusts you the most, said Tyrion. Anyone else would be wasting his time. My family murdered his family helped murder the queens. He doesn't know your sister or your brothers. Right now, you are the only chance we have to gain a powerful ally, and a trumping position against Cersei, the woman you hate more than most. Damn it, why did he always have to make a good point? Arya, Sansa said, at least just speak to him about, please. She scowled at all of them as they looked at her with pleading eyes. Fine. The fires of Gendry's forge, where, unlike any Arya had seen, the flames burned brighter and the heat felt hotter. She couldn't understand how he could stay in such a place for so long, even if it was outside in the cold. He was almost done finishing his first set, 4 Valyrian blades. He only had to treat them with heat and then quench the steel in the dragon blood. While he waited, he was working on an exquisite steel half-gauntlet. He was peening the fittings when, as Arya told him about Tyrion's proposal, when she finished, he only seemed to laugh at her. They are being serious, Arya exclaimed. I know they are, he told her. That's why I'm laughing. They're so desperate for power, they come to a bastard smith. She leaned back on the workbench he was at. Batards can have more worth than most. My brother proved that when he became king in the north. Except he was never a bastard, was he? That doesn't matter. He believed it, and so did everyone else. It still counts. Besides, you'll be given your family's name. And what a name it is. I know a little bit of history. You know, Baratheons have king's blood, yet look how far they fell. My father was a drunken fool. One of my uncles tried to kill me, and the brother he killed was a flower. Flower? Arya had never heard the term before. I only liked men, didn't he? From what I heard, he bedded with Loras Tyrell. Then he's a flower, and what am I? A bastard smith. Such a great and mighty house I come from. Well, maybe it's time for someone else to rule them then. She wasn't trying to persuade him, of course, but she understood Jon's desire for such back before he left for the Night's Watch. She figured Gendry would have jumped at the opportunity. You're being an arse about this. And I have the right to... He finished the fitting and began to polish the steel with a cloth. Do you remember that talk we had in the cave before I was taken? Yes, you said you were tired of serving others, and here you are serving my brother by forging for him. It's Valyrian steel. I'm not passing up an opportunity like this. Besides, your brother said I could leave any time I wanted. He did? Arya had no idea why Jon would let him. They needed Gendry, and yet he had an offer that suited him. Yeah, he did. He said he would contact a smith in Volantis to work with the steel if I didn't want to, but I told him that I would on the condition he pay me for my services. So that's it then? You're no better than the Brotherhood. He stopped polishing the armor and looked up at her, angry. They sold me to a witch for gold. I'm doing it for something better. What, a castle made of Valyrian steel? Not a castle, just someplace to call home. Arya did not expect that. I want to settle down somewhere. Start my own forge. Have a family. You could do that as Lord of the Stormlands if you wanted to. But I don't want to. People think that they serve the lords who rule them when it's actually the other way around. The lords have to take care of their people, tend to their needs, answer to the other lords. It's all just a big circle. You'd have people to help you with that. A maester at arms, advisors. She paused before continuing. A wife. Dundry just shook his head before resuming his work. You don't understand. You're a highborn who grew up in a castle while I grew up in the streets. Most people I knew never dreamed about being knights, living in castles, or getting rich. I just wanted something simple, and I still do. Arya felt near defeated, but she wouldn't give up easily. At least think it over until Jon gets back. Gendry didn't answer. Instead, he set the gauntlet down and checked on the blades. They're ready for the quench. He grabbed a pair of tongs and grabbed hold of the tang of one of the blades. You'll want to move, he said as he nodded his head at the tank that contained the dragon blood. Arya moved out of the way as Gendry lifted the blade out of the furnace and over to the blood. The instant the dull red metal touched the blood, it burst into flames as it sunk deeper. After a moment, Gendry pulled the blade out and the color changed to a dark black tint. But as the steam danced on the metal, Gendry looked concerned. There was a sudden noise coming from the blade that sounded like a loud crack. "What happened?" Arya asked, growing curious. "I'm not sure. This didn't happen the first time. But I have a feeling." Gendry picked up a nearby hammer as he laid the tip of the blade on the face of his anvil. Still holding the tang, he raised the hammer and swung down hard on the steel. When the hammer struck the metal, the blade shattered like glass. Arya jumped back, startled by the shattering steel. "Why did it do that?" "I'm not sure. I forged it just like I did your brothers." Gendry looked back at the furnace and grabbed hold of another blade. He repeating the quenching process, but when the blade was removed from the blood, it made the same noise and was just as brittle as the first one when he hit it. "What in seven hells?" "Maybe it's the blood," Arya suggested. "Maybe it can only do one sword at a time." Gendry still looked puzzled. "Maybe. I only did what that Night's Watch fellow told me he learned about it. I'll try emptying out the used blood of the tank and refilling it." As Gendry set down his tools, he noticed Arya wasn't saying anything to him, which looked like it bothered him. He looked up at her, waiting for something. "I have to go now, Gendry," she finally told him. "You're making it sound as if you're leaving Winterfell right now." "Not now, tonight," she said, making Gendry frown. "Then why are you wasting your time with me? Go enjoy your moments with your family." She grew agitated with him again, just as she did in the cave the Brotherhood kept them in. "You could be my family, too," she reminded as walked away from him after that, leaving him to his steel. As she crossed over the courtyard, she tried to contemplate the argument. She wasn't trying to persuade him, and neither did she want him to accept the position, so he could be pulled into the game. But the way he was acting, for once, it was like he was snobbish highborn. "Arya," Daenerys said. Arya stopped and saw Queen Daenerys with her translator walking nearby. "Your Grace," she bowed. She was glad that at least she respected her wish to not be called a lady. "Is everything all right? You looked rather angry at something." "Someone." Arya rolled her eyes, earning a smile from Daenerys. "Would you care to walk with me? I don't believe we've had a proper talk since becoming sisters." "Of course. I wouldn't mind at all. Where are you headed?" "To see my children." Arya's stoic mask cracked a little with a bit of excitement when she heard that. She never got to see the full-grown dragons up close, and as chance would have it, she was about to. She followed next to Daenerys as her translator remained at the castle. "Tyrion's told me that you plan to go to the Riverlands," Daenerys said. "I am. I'll be leaving tonight." "By yourself, taking on an entire army, no less." "Not an army, just the snake in charge." "I have no doubt in your skills, given how little I know of them. I've learned that usually the mysterious ones are the most fruitful in their endeavors." Daenerys stopped walking and turned to Arya, giving her a similar look that Sansa would when she was concerned. "However, you should be wary of yourself. Jon has told me that you are indeed a great fighter than almost everyone here. You take pride in yourself and your skills. Don't let that turn into arrogance. It nearly brought me down in Essos." Arya wanted to shrug her off, just as she did everyone. They kept treating her like a little girl who didn't know any better, and it was becoming too irritating. "I've brought down an entire house in a few days of work. This will be easier. I've known men who spoke those familiar words before. Some of them proved their quality while the rest of them died." The way she spoke was like she was telling of both fools and friends, but it was clear that she was worried about Jon and the rest who left for the Wall. It was sometimes hard to understand Daenerys' attitude. She presented herself like a queen and yet was very human, both in court and out. They both continued walking onward. Desperate times call for desperate measures. We both have seen parts of the world that others would never dream of or imagine. The only way to believe Jon's world is to see it ourselves. "Does that mean you don't believe him?" Daenerys asked. "I never said that. I believe him because he's my brother and I know he wouldn't lie to me of all people. He did say that you were the closest to him growing up." Arya reminisced on the memories when they were all children. The days when they were all together. "He was the only one who tried to understand me. I feel like he's still the only one who does." Daenerys grew a bit silent afterwards, pondering Arya's words. "I envy you. To have him in your life when you needed him the most. The only I had was my brother. He was vile man, but he used to be kind. But those days have long since passed." They finally reached the nesting grounds of the dragons, and it was truly a sight to behold. Arya lost all of her stature and stoic form when she came so close with the queen's dragons. The big green one lifted its head up first when it noticed the queen approaching, and the other two did the same. The big black and red one came forward and met Daenerys, who casually caressed his snout with her hands like the dragon was a tame animal. Daenerys looked back to Arya, who was well enough away. "Would you like to touch him?" The only answer she gave was an excited smirk. She didn't try to hide as she strode forward and reached her hand out. The dragon growled so low it was like thunder. His size gave a much more imposing presence like the mountain himself, but far more dangerous. She touched the dragon's scales and could feel the vibrations of its growling. What's his name? Drogon. The other two were Viserion and Rhaegal. It was amazing. She had touched Jon's dragons and been marveled at them. But this was on another level. The other two dragons watched with narrowed eyes. In a way, it really did feel like they were children, jealous of all the attention their brother was getting. "Come," Daenerys took Arya's hand and led her to the side of Dragon's neck. Arya's excited grew too much, that it became fear. "What?" "Join me for a ride," Daenerys said with a hint of sarcasm nor exaggeration. A ride? I don't think. She didn't care about the dangers at all in the moment. She did as Daenerys did and climbed up the side of Drogon and sat herself down as best she could. "Where do I grab?" she asked, looking for something to hang on to. "Wherever you can," Daenerys called back at her as she gripped two of Drogon's spikes. Arya panicked and wrapped her arms around Daenerys just before Drogon spread his enormous wings and punched off of the ground. She let out a small scream of excitement and hugged onto Daenerys tighter as they took to the skies. The two other dragons flew after them as Drogon glided over the snowy landscapes below. Daenerys almost laughed as they banked over the castle and were in full view of Winterfell's inhabitants. The wind stung Arya's eyes as she looked down to the courtyards and saw many watchers, including Rickon and Sansa. Drogon flew higher up and the view was greater than any watchtower could ever hope to reach. If they got high enough, maybe even Castle Serwyn would come into sight. Just being able to fly in the skies felt incredibly powerful. It made Arya feel like she was one of the Targaryen warrior princesses she loved as a child. No, it made her feel more than that, like a dragon herself. "This is amazing." She yelled as loud as she could, earning a laugh from Daenerys. "Hold on," Daenerys called out. Arya wrapped her arms around her as they dove down at incredible speed. They were going straight for a grouping of trees and pulled up just before hitting them. The winds following after Drogon swept the snow off the branches and the ground into a giant puff of clouds that dispersed as Viserion and Rhaegal came from behind. A dragon screeching came from the north, and Ygritte and Lyaris came into view. The two of Jon's dragons flew over Drogon and followed after him once they noticed Arya on his back. Given how smaller they were, however, they fell behind much so. "Should we go back?" Daenerys asked. "Just a bit longer," Arya pleaded. She didn't want this moment to end just yet. For the rest of the day, Arya couldn't think of anything else except for how spectacular the ride was. If only she had a dragon of her own, maybe Ygritte or Lyaris would let her be their rider one day. There have been those without Targaryen blood who tamed dragons, after all. Arya was eating her supper with Sansa and her brothers in the Great Hall with everyone else. Gendry decided to sit in a corner of the room, obviously upset at her and at his failed attempts in the forge. He changed the blood, but the effect was the same. In the end, he let the dragon fire that lit his forge die out and consulted with Sam the rest of the day. Word got out, and people began to doubt his skill as a blacksmith. At the high table, Arya dipped her spoon into a rabbit stew, still steaming from the freshness. As she blew on her spoonful, cooling it off, Sansa seemed now was the time to talk. "Arya, how did it feel?" "Incredible." She immediately replied, "I don't care how ladylike you are. You need to try it at least once. It's so incredible." Sansa smiled lightly, but she didn't seem amazed. "I'll ask Jon for that honor. He always struck me as a tame person. And what I saw today was rather wild." It was a vague description compared to how it actually was, but it fit Arya's personality perfectly. "Arya, I implore you to reconsider going south. We've never fared well going south." "Implore? If you're too much of a lady to say beg, then don't implore at all," she said to her sister as she ate her soup. "Arya." Sansa almost slammed her fist on the table, but stopped and recollected herself. "Why are you being so stubborn?" "Because I'm sick of diplomacy and debating. I need a good fight. It's the only thing that gets something done these days." Arya continued eating her soup, but Sansa just kept staring at her. not believing she was being serious. Sansa stood up from her seat and left the table, confusing Arya. "What'd I say?" Sansa ignored her and left the Great Hall. "Are you as empty as Bran is?" Rickon asked, his mouth full of bread he was eating. "What you mean?" Rickon dropped his bread on his plate and swallowed his food. "Before you returned to Winterfell, everyone here thought you were either dead or missing. You can imagine the concern we have if that were to happen again. I can take care of myself. I'm not a lady of the court. I'm a fighter, the best damn one here. You're still our sister, you idiot. Do you think we're only allowed to worry about everyone else but you?" Rickon looked frustrated, clenching his fist on the table. "Go apologize to her." Arya scoffed at him. "You can't be serious. Get out of your seat and go apologize to her." Arya couldn't help but laugh at him. The next thing she knew, Rickon had jumped out of his seat and tackled her to the ground. His attempt to wrestle at her was pointless, even though he was bigger than her. She maneuvered herself on top of him and pressed his face to the floor, pinning him down. After a few moments to calm down, Arya let go of Rickon and stood up to let him get off the ground. He refused to look at her as he started to tear up. She left him to weep, made her way out of the Great Hall, ignoring the staring that followed her. She found herself outside in the courtyard, enjoying the time alone. She walked past Gendry's forge and saw a pile of shattered steel on a table. All of it was the attempted Valyrian steel, broken like pieces of glass. She approached it and gently sifted through the pieces, looking for any that had the rippled pattern. In the pile, she found a piece that was a shape that interested her. She held it firmly in her hand as left the forge. As she made her way back inside, she could hear someone sobbing on the battlements. She looked at the source and saw Sansa. Arya kept silent as she walked up beside her sister. Sansa finally noticed and wiped her tears away. She stared out to the fields of Winterfell, not saying anything to Arya. "I don't want you to worry about me," Arya spoke softly, "but I do want you to hope I come back. You're my only sister. It's going to be impossible for me not to worry." Sansa's voice croaked, still not recovered from her sadness. She turned her head to Arya, looking afraid. Arya just gave her a comforting smile. "In winter, we must protect ourselves, look after one another." Those words were spoken to her when she thought she absolutely hated Sansa. Now she spoke them to her, knowing she felt the complete opposite now. Sansa broke through her fear and showed some joy with a smile. "Father," she stated, "when the snows fall and the white winds blow, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives." Sansa's smile faded at the memory of their father. "I miss him," Arya said, starting to feel sorrowful too. "Me too." There was a small silence between them as they just gazed out to the north. "I can't handle another goodbye." "Then don't say it, otherwise we might not see each other again." Arya revealed the piece of steel she picked out from the pile, showing it to Sansa. "When I get back, this will be something beautiful to remind you of a promise." "What promise?" "I will always come home." Sansa couldn't help but hug her. When they first reunited, Arya didn't have that much feelings towards Sansa, but now she gave her a real hug. An hour passed, and Arya was already on horse riding to the hills bordering Winterfell. She had all she needed. Her faces, needle, the Valyrian steel dagger, and food. The only thing she was missing was some company. She stopped her horse for a moment and looked back to the castle, wondering if Sansa was still on the battlements, watching. "Goodbye, Sansa,"